But you can see that the average rainfall has not decreased. It's the number of rainy days which has really decreased. So there is a change in the rainfall. And when there is a change of a rainfall, our country, which is mainly a agriculture-based country, is mainly getting affected. Our agriculture is getting affected. And when the agriculture is 69% of our population is on with the agriculture sector, as you all know, so they are getting affected, and anything that is getting affected that is not, that is bringing in a mental order there. They are facing the mental problems there because they are losing livelihood. They have to support the family and all those. So there is a mental challenges that they are facing, but it has never been recorded. It's very recently it is getting recorded that how people who are facing these disasters having a mental anxiety. I think there's a recent term that has been coined for that is a eco anxiety. Uh, so what I'm going to talk here, because I have mainly talked with so many women who have faced this disaster. And what I found is that women are mainly are the most affected one, vulnerable one. And when there is a migration, to provide the most resilient solution to the migrant and to the saver bank, which has given them a loan, and they have structured the EMI in a way that they can give it whenever they are harvesting it. So we need policies like that, which would be helpful to these who are the major users of our solar pumps. We have about
So, yeah, so I think I'm extremely happy that we have had received so many scientific papers. So, this is going to be the first reveal of a book of abstracts. I think a big round of applause for all of us, all the abstracts. And then, as you all know, that good papers will be screened both in-house in the campus as well as by the journal peer review committee. And the best of the papers will be published in Scopus Indexed and Web of Index journals. And we also have a publication opportunity for the good presentations and as book chapters as well. So again, once again, thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, all of you, and we can take this. Thank you so much, please.
To take the discussion forward, next we have a conversation session. Our speakers for the session are Dr. Kshitij, Executive Director, India Biochar and Bioresources Network, Bangalore, who is joining us. Mr. Suresh, our convener, Center for Environmental Studies, the Energy and Resources, New Delhi. Bhandari, New Delhi. Nabila Siddiqui
for the organization's social justice program, staff and budget for Karnataka, Kerala, and beyond in southern India. In this period, he has also worked as the global head for Action Aid based in Sydney, Australia. Prior to Action Aid, he was the co-founder and director in social action based community based organization working on issues of urban governance, planning, and land use. Mr. Kshitij, S University, asked to cities should be because a source of discrimination. If one were to look at urban deprivation, lack of access of water is important as food or education. Unquote. Indeed, he is a package of knowledge. We welcome you, sir. Let me introduce our third panelist, that is Mr. Apurva Bhandari, CEO and the founder of Sankalp Taru Foundation. Mr. Apurva holds MBA in Oil and Gas Management and started his career working with Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. He has also worked with a few big IT companies and was on consulting assignment in the US before he decided to return to India and work for environmental conservation. For this purpose, he made a non-profit Sankalp Taru Foundation. Mr. Apurv has traveled across India and is passionate about giving back to the society and the mother nature. He is a firm believer of sustainable living and has incorporated this in his lifestyle also. He is the founder and CEO of Sankalp Taru Foundation, which is a tech-based environmental NGO with a mission to increase the global green cover. He has planted more than 3.5 million trees across 26 states and union territories in India. The organization's project run across various dimensions of rural livelihood programs, urban forestry, community plantation, and school-based plantation drives. We welcome you, sir.
For giving me the opportunity to be part of this discussion. But my topic of interest is basically covering the air pollution aspects. So when you talk about the air pollution aspects, we need at local and international perspectives because we can't just rely on our own sources. Because there are a lot of studies which we have done in the past which indicated that air quality is not merely a regional or a city specific issue. So we need to take into account the other aspect also. We need to have a big collaborative research with the other partners also for this particular thing. So there are a lot of other which we need to discuss in the platform, but this is the basic thing that I need to address over here.
Sir, would you like to take up and answer the question?
I believe global warming and climate change are becoming larger problems now. And I believe that's why we all are here to discuss. Of course, it requires to be a people's movement now because it's not one person's problem. It's the problem of planet. And of course, uh, people people are part of the planet, which is, I believe, the theme of this uh, talk as well. So, so a collaborative approach to mitigate challenges of global warming and climate change, um, making it a mass movement, and adopting technology to really beat this challenge would be is the need of the hour, I would say.
Sir, Mr. Kshitij? Sir, are we audible to you?
Yeah, you are audible. I hope this works. Am I audible?
Absolutely audible, yes, sir.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I do have a presentation, but then let me quickly respond to a question. First of all, I think because of climate change, as well as the knowledge, access to knowledge systems, you've got information on your mobile and your laptop, and you've got information 24/7. There is much more of an ecological consciousness among people. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's much more of an ecological consciousness. People know much more about the environment today than probably a little earlier. But then, has it actually led to an eco-centric policy making? That's a question for us to inquire. And there have been, as you know, there have been annual sessions globally. And in the early 1980s, we were able to come together as an international community to look at the ozone layer depletion, right? And we were able to get together and work on it. But then has that momentum been able to be sustained over a period of time? Not necessarily so. So to kind of my response to this specific question, there's much more knowledge among the people, but the policies still have a long way to go as far, for them to become much more ecocentric.
Thank you so much, sir. I believe you wish to say that there's a no trickle down approach that we have. So there are good policies, but implementation is what we lack. That is what I sense from your observations. So this brings us to the next question. The next question is, what role do you think do communities play in consonance while pushing for environmental movements? We've seen Chipko movement for that matter. We've seen a lot of community-based movements. So do you think community-based movements are the key to further future problems?
Hello. Thank you. That's because involvement of community is very much important in the perspective of whatever be the topic that you are dealing with. Especially when I talk about there is so without community you can't do anything. Strategy, you interventions you come play that for the particular sector which are contributing to air pollution, and people are aware of this. No, educate to train them, and then only the system will work. So that awareness is a key to all those successes. That is my point.
So I will share one case example since we've been involved in tree plantation activities on ground. So the story comes from Ladakh. In fact, I was 4 days back. I was there talking to the communities and mobilizing our team for the next plantation season. So back in 2014, when we started off plantation in Ladakh, and it's a cold desert, devoid of greenery, uh, oxygen deficient as well. People, uh, uh, talking to of course, people are very passionate about uh, the direction, right? What kind of trees needs to be planted? Are they going to be? Are these plantation drives going to be successful out there? There were a lot of when we were talking to the communities out there. So we came up with a concept of Apple Village. I mean, Kashmir is next door or the neighborhood. So we started this initiative around 6 years back, and then slowly, initially people were apprehensive: are we going to be successful? Are our lands be utilized for the cause, or all those things? So now I'm very happy that we have grown about 10 clusters of Apple Village villages out there. People are not only there is apple trees out there, but there is a their livelihood as well. Peas in one apples is what they're being offered. So there's a positive increase in that livelihood. There's a good impact on the environment as well because of those trees. So all I'm trying to say is yes, when you involve communities in these kind of movements, attach livelihood to it, certainly the movement becomes bigger, and there are not only environmental impact indicators showing you results, but there are socio-economic indicators as well. So that's my take on that.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, sir.
Can I respond?
Yes, absolutely, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, I think your question is very important. I mean, unfortunately, I've not been able to be there today, and I hope this works. Um, see, I'm also the co-founder of the Center for Social Action, which is a Christ initiative that in 1999, along with a couple of colleagues from Christ. Now, the department's objective is to get students through an experiential learning process, that they understand the socio-economic situation and the cultural context in which we operate in this particular world. Now, taking that objective forward, I think it's important for students there. Look, I really cannot see them, and I hope they are able to understand. Please feel free to question. See, nothing that we take for granted today, nothing that we take that we take for granted today, has been able to be moments with coming together. Let's just talk about a couple of examples. We talk about an 8-hour work per day. Where did that start? We take it for granted today, or we talk about a 5-day week or a 6-day week. Did that just happen up? And did you have a progressive government which suddenly decided, okay, 8 hours a day? No, it did not, right? In the era of industrialization, so we're talking about 200 years ago, and even less than that, people worked till they died. People used to work for 16 hours, 17 hours, etc. Now, it was the people, it was the community's participation, it was the creation of movements which started demanding for such rules and policies to happen. So, my there, I know this is very inanimate because I'm so far away in Delhi, much as I can, and that whichever, as an individual, you have a sense of, you know what is the world, to the extent that you do. And, the idea is to, to nurture that sense of agency so you can actually contribute to a change. And each one of you is capable of doing that, right? Because nothing in this world has been able to, to have been achieved today without the participation of people. And so it's really not about approach of participation, which is not the topic for today's. In Delhi, I students in Bangalore very often, but something that's much more substantial to be able to bring about a change. Yeah, so community participation and movements are very important. And very quickly, globally today, this is not the era for movement. Movements building or movements themselves have become not so considerate a word, not too accommodated by the state. So we need to reinvent this whole process of movement creation.
Thank you so much, sir. This also reminds us from the best practice model that we have in Kerala. I think it's the Plakshimada state, where people rebelled around the building of the Coca-Cola plant. And successfully, they were able to shoo away the big company. So people versus the MNC. I think that's a very big example that the audience to the community participation or probably raise a question related to flag bearer. Okay, I believe it's a lot of contention and deliberation. Yes, we have a question there.
Hello. Very good morning to everybody, and thank you, sirs and ma'am. I would like to comment on the same thing. That of course, community participation is very important. As Christites, I believe our campus has encouraged us to follow a lot of sustainable practices We have waste segregation happening in our campus. And personally also, I'm a big believer of, personal change. So I, for one, use only my own cutlery that I bring. And I would like to use this mic and this stage to urge it for everybody to follow a very simple practice of carrying your own cutlery to avoid a lot of single-use plastic waste that happens every day in our campus. It's a very simple practice. You bring your own spoon and your fork and you wash it, and all of it is very easily, accessible. And our campus allows us to follow such practices. And uh, it might seem, ki, what will one fork or one spoon do? Trust me, bread meals in campus, you stay in the hostel. It's a lot of waste. It's a lot of single-use plastic that can be avoided. So if we all as students, we can avoid that generates there are these such waste going to landfills. So yeah,
Thank
wanted
you,
to
ma'am.
say.
I think
Thank you.
one person will have the same effect or same ripple effect that one drop of water has in the ocean. So I think you've given us a very big promise here, and I believe that all of us will carry forward that promise. Quickly, a last question. So since we are in the age of social media, news, how do you see the depiction of environment in media specifically? What place does it have? Because as to me, as per my knowledge, little knowledge, I find environment to be one of the missing components of news reporting, or probably even in the print media. Your comments quickly. Yes.
Yeah, key question. Because media plays a vital role in public and also across the world. They have both positive and negative impacts of media communication. I always talk about air pollution because I'm doing expertise in. People are just projecting in tennis stands in spreading across the world, but in a negative way because it is impacting the image of the country. Okay, so and the other image, which is source of air pollution, the cricket players are not playing in the field and they are asking to postpone the cricket match. So these are the kind of things which are coming out. But at the same time, there are a lot of positive impacts also. Media plays a very, very vital role in communicating to the public. So air pollution, and maybe before long back, maybe 2, 3 decades ago, how many of you knows about air pollution? How many of you nowadays, even in the corona impact is mass. This is not because of the of the pollution. Awareness which is coming through the people society role. They are spreading the news across the thing, which contributing. So which are contributing to the air pollution of a city or anything. Not media, that is not, because I'm keeping it and that was fun. But if you are not communicating through media or other aspects, whatever, because for Delhi's air pollution, when I did the study, I could understand that 60% or 60 to 80% of Delhi's pollution is not contributed by Delhi. It is coming from outside the Delhi. Now, people are aware. Now, people are directly blaming Punjab and for that. The they are same way contribute to the reality of because depend on the meteorology. So I think without now one not I mean
So
Want to for social media from that perspective, mitigate the from our mitigate platform. They can plant trees on. Okay, you take a card use novels and books. But slowly, gradually, seeing that most of our contribute people who are planting on that our age 20 people, I would say, created. We respond back. People tell them that your tree has been planted. Here, um, we share the Google location of that tree. We share the photograph of the tree. That there are periodic updates we share with them. It's on the you know online platform or through internet. We've been able to maintain the transfer. People do come, they make a surprise visit and the trees. I'm trying to say, or power of enable, then further awareness so handy or available that we've been creating awareness. That's a good sign. And as I said, uh, uh, um, the most of the internet users are youngsters. So we see that taking charge of things, certainly, I mean, not as they used to be. Because we have a lot of hope from this younger age group as well. So we believe that you use this uh, in creating that.
the error could also safely say information. That's also
Is that you're because a very university right now, simplest. We are what here, of course, determined of the internet, where there is still some which is effective in nature. More is generated by the owners of house to direct towards a certain objective, right? And Chomsky very clearly talked about manufacturing of and manufacturing can be either which way. It can be towards things related by things. Let me quickly give an example. Now, is supposed to make one aware of let's talk about so which means to take the society on a journey that our knowledge becomes deeper and deeper as we go on. The number two is based on the knowledge that we get, the opportunity to act upon that information.
True.
Right? So it's the European information, the US information, yeah, very way far in the change. It's still fairly nascent. It's very basic. Some except requires an applause after this discussion for the work that she said she brings her own cutlery and she spoke about plastic. Now, if she will get even more information, then their own behavior. For example, in terms of its contribution, I'm not even talking even compared to, okay, basket is determined by the mainstream market put together. This is also to go these and build and grow only about these 15. So if we have more information, which the media has to do, then students like the one who spoke will have even more opportunities to do amazing things, miraculous things to save this planet. So that's the response to the media will work on it. As we go on. I hope you just got a message that my audio was not.
Same sword. I think we most important party because it's not. No one to that is conclusion.
That was indeed a beautiful story and an enlightening discussion, and it certainly did make us ponder. I now request Dr. Garima Joshi to arrive on stage and present our moderator, Ms. Nabila, and our offline panelists to present saplings as a token of our gratitude. You can join us for tea. Let's carry on the stimulating conversations over a cup of tea. I start to move towards the corridor for a short tea break. We shall resume the conference proceedings that have been in the conference schedule. I request our faculty and us to volunteer at the exit doors and stalls. Our participants for the next session are ready, and I request participants who are allocated journals and conference proceedings. He also has a keen research interest in international trade and investment and behavioral economics. We welcome you, sir, and request you to arrive on stage and take the session forward.
Thank you, Dr. Ilika, for such a warm introduction. Now, I would like to call upon Mr. Parth Joshi. He will be the panelist in this current session. Let me introduce Mr. Parth first. Mr. Parth Joshi is a development, research, and advocacy professional based in New Delhi with over 12 years of experience in project management, strategic research, public policy, and communication. He has experience of working in a wide range of sectors with industry, academia, government, and local communities towards creating sustainable and inclusive growth models through grassroots projects, academic discourses, and industry forums. Mr. Parth is currently Communication Officer at UNDP India. In this role, he develops and implements communication strategies to enhance engagement and outreach with an emphasis on issues pertaining to climate and biodiversity. He also supports initiative on a strategic partnership and technology-driven innovation within the environment, energy, and resilience portfolio. Prior to this, he was Vice President, Strategic Government Advisory at Yes Bank, providing advisory services and knowledge management support to government institutions and industry forum. An avid outdoorsman, he has a keen interest in adventure travel, running, and photography. So we welcome you, sir. Please. I also take this opportunity to welcome Professor Rahul Singh. Professor Singh is Professor and Chairperson, Chair of Strategy, Innovation and Sustainability, and Chair of CESTR BIMTech at Birla Institute of Management Technology, India. Dr. Singh is also founding chair of the Executive Education Program. His domain of work has been strategy, sustainability, and digital transformation. Dr. Singh is awarded AICT Dr. Pritam Singh National Best Professor 2021 Award by AICT, Minister of Education, Government of India. Professor Singh is Best Researcher Award recipient 2017 and Best Teacher Award recipient 2022 at Birla Institute. He has received many accolades for his research, papers, and scholarly activities. Dr. Singh founded India Center for Public Policy in 2008 and launched first Masters in Sustainable Development Practices in collaboration with the GAMDP Earth Institute, Columbia University. This was the first sustainability practice masters of the country in collaboration. He has been in jury panel of IICA for best CSR cases, contributing in CSR India, and drafted CSR policy of Steel Authority of India Limited, SAIL. Dr. Singh is also contributing to society through his foundation, Saraswati Seva Foundation, established in 2016, which has reached to about 30,000 school students for quality education and 500 youth for employment, contributing to the life of underprivileged. A researcher and writer contributing to newspaper, magazine, and invited by national TV for debates. He has also received several Best Research Professor and Best Research Paper awards for his research. He has published in top-tier journals, including Journal of Business Research, Industrial Marketing Management, Journal of Brand Management, etc. Dr. Singh has received large funding for various assignments from Confederation of Indian Industry, European Union, British Council, and US Aid. Some of the noted contributions include Global Vision at 2022 for 3 states of India and first think tank survey of India, strategic plan for internationalization of universities. So we welcome you, sir. And let me tell you, I have edited some portion here. Thank you. Let me also welcome all the students, distinguished faculty member for this session. And some of you have just joined us. So this is our panel discussion on International Conference on Environment and Sustainable Development, Interdisciplinary Trends and Practices in collaboration with University of Salerno, Italy. So with permission, let me begin this session and let me join them there. So what we will do in this session, first I would request Mr. Parth for his opening remark, and then similarly I will be requesting Professor Rahul for his opening remarks, and then after the opening remarks, maybe the audience can have their questions ready, maybe we can have a question answer session also, and in between, if we think that we can intervene also. So please be ready with your questions. So now let me request Mr. Parth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhandari. Dr. Singh, distinguished members of the faculty and dear students, good morning to all of you. And at the outset, let me congratulate the department and the college. It's very good to see a department of psychology focusing on an initiative like climate action. Just shows how penetrating and cross-cutting an issue this is. So I'll just probably start by giving you a brief of what UNDP is. So UNDP stands for the United Nations Development Program. It's one of the development agencies under the United Nations network. And we basically work on achieving what are called the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, as you might have heard of them. So we've been there in India since 1952, so close to 70 years now. And there are 3-4 key areas that we work upon. First is inclusive growth. So that includes providing livelihoods, income, basic necessities to people who need it the most. We work on health and governance. So we work on streamlining healthcare system, especially the vaccine delivery system. And since we're just recovering from COVID, the COVID platform, you may remember, so UNDP was a partner to the Ministry of Health in developing that. And then we have the environment, energy and resilience portfolio, which I also happen to represent. So within these 4 key portfolios, we work across the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. There are 17 SDGs. There are SDG 13 focuses on climate action, but we also have SDG 14 and 15, life on land and life on water, respectively. But I'd just like to highlight here that climate change or climate action goes beyond all these SDGs, and it's a very cross-cutting issue. So at UNDP, we actually work at the interface of where climate change is affecting people, especially the marginal and the vulnerable communities. So, I mean, today, as we stand, and all of us are kind of fresh from the pandemic, so we know now the large scale of impact that climate change and biodiversity loss can have upon us. And it's not just limited to extreme weather events or the damage because of that. It also has an impact upon areas such as health, such as education, such as women empowerment and gender equality. So recently there was a study that showed how climate change has led to an increase in gender-based violence. Now, if you look at it, the two seem very disconnected or not that directly connected. But it so happens that because of climate change, because of loss of livelihoods, there's an increasing instance of more pressure upon women to be the resource generators or to become the income bearers. And that is also, I mean, since this is the Department of Psychology, it's a very important subject to analyze, I believe, how climate change is affecting the psyche of various strata of the society. It's affecting the lower strata in a very different way, where you see instances of gender based violence rising. In the middle or higher income strata, there's a sense of depression, there's a sense of helplessness that pervades within the community, especially as we are in the post COVID era and still recovering from it. So, these are some of the aspects where climate change and psychology kind of come at an intersection. Another important area I'd like to highlight is the Human Development Report, which is something that UNDP has been doing globally for the past 30 years. So, the Human Development Report basically aims to measure human well being that goes beyond income. So, when we talk of development, we usually think about removing poverty, and the primary indicator that we see is how is a country's GDP doing, how is a country's economy doing. But very often we find that these parameters are not enough. And you can be a very well earning, a high income individual, and you might still be suffering from bad health. You might still have psychological issues. So, well being goes beyond income. Well being also relates to our physical and mental health. It relates to how we are doing as a society, how equitable is it, and also how we are able to care and uplift the most marginal and the vulnerable. In terms of the context here, climate action, sustainable development, the session that we are here today, as I said before, climate action is very cross-cutting. It's leading to resource insecurities. So water, we live in the shadow of the Himalayan regions. They are also called the third pole because they hold the highest amount of fresh water after the polar regions. Now, the water from these regions not only feeds the mountain people, it feeds billions around the Indian subcontinent and also around Central Asia. Most of our major rivers emanate from these regions. And we all know that the glaciers are melting at a faster rate. So, what's happening out there in the mountains has a bearing on someone probably sitting in the coast of Odisha and West Bengal. So that is one. Secondly, it has an impact on our food security. We see lots of new diseases cropping up. We see lots of crop failures happening. We see droughts, we see floods, and all of us that has an impact on food production. And for a country like India, where we need to feed more people, we need to provide more food to people, that also has big ramifications on that. Then we look at income. Livelihoods are suffering. We saw the heat waves in India this summer, and it basically affects the livelihood of those at the bottom of the pyramid. So if you're people out in the streets, we are in a way privileged that we sit in air conditioned offices and institutions and we're about to plow on with our trade. But there are millions, and a large majority of our workforce actually works in sectors like construction, retail, transport. And all of these people are subject to health risks, which then become income risks. Then we have issues like health and education. We all know, we've all seen the pandemic and we know what impact health has. And but apart from that, there's also a sense of discomfort that we feel, and probably that's much more common in our urban surroundings. We do not have access to green spaces. We are not interacting with biodiversity that very often. So as humans have evolved, we've always been in touch with nature, and as that disconnect is fostering, we see it more in the younger generation. So we'll see in our children how they are not being able to grow up in a way that we envisaged them to be, simply because they do not have access to green spaces. Green spaces are becoming a premium. In rural areas, we have issues like sanitation. that are also one related to climate change, because if you have floods, if you have droughts, if you have access to resources, how do you provide services like health and sanitation to those who need it the most? So those, and of course I mentioned gender issues, so that remains one of the focus areas. And we've recently come through COP27, the 27th conference of the parties of the UNFCCC, which is also the climate change COP. And we are right now proceeding with the biodiversity COP as we speak, which is happening in Montreal. So both these conference of parties are very important. Last year at the Glasgow COP, we had countries saying that we will commit, and it was probably the biggest COP after COVID. The COP before that was the Paris Agreement that we all know of. So after the 2015 Paris Agreement, the 2021 Glasgow COP was, from a policy perspective, a landmark moment, because the countries actually kind of acknowledged that we need to do much more. And this year's COP, which was supposed to be more of an implementation COP, because we had lots of big announcements at the COP last year, and most of the working groups were working on putting an implementation mechanism in place. So the one big achievement this year was that all the parties agreed to create loss and damage fund. Now, loss and damage fund in a nutshell, if I try to explain, so there are two aspects to climate change. One is climate mitigation, where we try to reduce our emissions, we try to reduce our carbon footprint, so that we are able to keep global warming within a sustainable limit, below 1.5 degrees by 2030 if possible, if not at least below 2 degrees, beyond which things might become very difficult for us. And then you have climate adaptation, where you acknowledge that there are lots of people who are already suffering from the impacts of climate change. It's real for them, and there's a lot of damage to infrastructure, to economy, that especially developing countries are facing. So if, as a developing country, I'm supposed to pursue development in a sustainable manner while reducing my carbon footprint, and I have the same pot of resources to give compensation to my population who are suffering infrastructure or loss of livelihoods due to climate change, that's not enough for me. So the loss and damage fund will basically try to compensate developing or underdeveloped nations for the infrastructure loss or the loss of livelihoods that they're suffering now because of the emissions that developed countries had committed in these last couple of centuries, because of which we are facing these natural disasters. So this is, in a nutshell, the crux of where we are now in terms of the international climate discourse. At the biodiversity COP that is happening now, we will come out with something called the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So just like we have these 1.5 degree or 2 degree targets for limiting global warming, we had something called the Aichi targets, which were decided at the COP in Aichi, and they were valid to 2020. Now, we have not achieved a lot of those, which is not a very encouraging news, but we hope to build forward better, especially as we recover from the pandemic. So post 2020, the Global Biodiversity Framework will fix a set of targets, just like the SDGs, for protecting our biodiversity. And once that is put in place, we try to, from a policy perspective, the kind of work we do as UN agencies is helping governments meet their national targets. So to meet the climate targets, the government of India has its National Action Plan on Climate Change. The states have their state action plans on climate change, where they have initiatives to, one, both reduce their emissions, and second, also to protect people from the impacts of climate change that we are facing now, and also to build the climate resilience of communities, because we know now more natural disasters will happen. We are at a threat of more pandemics. So what can we do to make our infrastructure, our societies, our communities more resilient to these disasters as they happen? So this, in a nutshell, is kind of the broad spectrum that where we are globally. At UNDP India, what we do, one, we of course help the government implement these action plans of climate change. We work with departments both at the national level as well as the state or at the district, at the grassroots. We work with community organizations, and we try to look at the climate resilience aspect as well as the biodiversity conservation aspect. So, for example, we have projects on protecting snow leopard landscapes in the high altitude Himalayan regions. Now, to do that, one, of course, is you have national parks, you strengthen their protection mechanisms, you empower their staff that is there. But what we also want to do is promote something called the landscape-based approach to conservation. Now, the traditional approach to conserving our protected areas has been to cordon off. It's been more of a prohibitive approach that you say this is a national park, humans cannot enter here, so that nature can thrive. Now, that is well and good, but the issue then we have we need to feed our people. We need more farming land. We have requirements for infrastructure, for industry. Now, what do we do then? So in that case, what we require is to go beyond those protected areas. Of course, you let your current protected areas remain. You try to expand them to a rational limit as possible. But even outside protected areas, how can you maintain green spaces? How can you protect biodiversity? And what that does is, and you do that in collaboration with communities. So protecting wildlife does not have to come at the cost of livelihood of a villager. It has to be done in conjunction or in harmony. So how do you do that? So these are some of the key issues we work in. On an industry infrastructure front, we work with MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprises. How do you make them more energy efficient? How do you green their manufacturing processes? For larger corporates, how do you ensure that the value chains or supply chains are less emission oriented? These are some of the areas. Then we have circular economy, which I'm sure Dr. Singh will explain to you in more detail, so I won't go there. But as cities, as our consumption pattern grows, because as I said, in India and in many developing countries, we have one section of the society that has too much, that is wasteful. But we have another section of the society that is malnourished, that needs more food, that needs more social services. So their carbon footprint is going to rise. Their carbon footprint must increase for us to ensure they have a decent life and livelihood. So how do you reduce the emissions or the consumption of those who are consuming more and use that to provide that to people who need it more? So I think I've stopped here and over to Dr. Singh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Path. I think, yeah, I believe you set a tone, and it was a short but an important master class in, climate action and climate change. I'm sure a student must have taken some notes out of it, and probably after Professor Rahul, probably they must be ready with some of the queries and questions. I have some, so I will be asking after this. And in the meantime, let me request Professor Rahul to give his opening remarks. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? Yeah, can you go there?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This was better, thank you. So at least I could understand that you have taken some break and maybe some snacks, tea, coffee, and you're back to your energy level. Why did I check on timing? I'm a professor. I should not go beyond the time limits which are given to me. Dr. Bhandari, Mr. Joshi, Dr. Gupta, Sneha ji, everyone, thank you so much. And more than that, students, I think now we are having many parallel sessions, so number is going to be maximum in the audience, in this kind of hall, of course. And then there are certain expectations. Those expectations are connecting to the interaction that we are going to have. There was a great mind mapping by Parth on how sustainabilities look like, right? What is a mind map? You understand it. You are doing it in social media nowadays. My structure is going to be on what Mr. Joshi has spoken about. We are continuing the discussion. How can I put that into practice? You have information design. How can I put that in practice? Okay. So on the topic, and I have taken my notes and a structure on how action plan towards sustainable future works. I'll start with a couple of questions with you, and maybe just to remind you that did we think of this 25 years back, 20 years back, when my parents were talking about 50 years back, your parents were talking about maybe 20 years back, what was the language when it came to sustainability? So the language in our time, that means your time, today's time is how much is the carbon footprint we are saving or spending. Did we have the same language 20 years back? Were we not sustainable then? Were we not concerned to sustainability? What was the method of connecting ourselves to sustainability that point of time? So that is going to be my push, checking on certain assumptions coming from our life, daily lifestyle. Are we going in the right direction? Can we check it at our end? Do we want governments to do this, or UNDP, or any other UN organization to do this? There are about 16 or 18 UN organizations, World Bank, WTO, sorry, not WTO probably, World Bank, IMF, and UNESCO, and so on and so forth. UNDP is one of them. Who is the central point on connecting sustainability? And that means thinking of sustainable future. And what is an action point? So do we get action points in the books? If you're saying no, then why don't we get it? If you're saying yes, then we are relevant as professors. Do we get that in the articles and magazines? If authors and practitioners are relevant, then we get it. Otherwise, we are not getting it. That means there is a gap, and we need to identify that gap. Okay, so that's my focus. And this is a student group, so my focus is different. If this was a practitioner group, my focus could have been different. This is the context I have set in past 2 minutes, 15 seconds or so. My first question is, have you ever heard of a municipality in a village? Please raise your hand who have heard of it. A municipality in a village. Have you heard of a municipality in a city? Raise your hand. Fantastic, almost 150, everyone. Why do you not need a municipality in a village? Can somebody stand up and shout so that I can hear? One action-oriented person. We are in the session of action. Can you stand up, please, so that I can see you? I have a lot of focus on me. It should be. Less population, okay? That's one. Good, thank you. There is absolutely a different system. Absolutely, good, fantastic. Third. Which is the mechanism of delivery you're talking. Very good. Any other point? Connected to sustainability, which is not systems and maybe not individual. Yeah? Go ahead.
Hello. So I personally believe, adding on to all the points, the lifestyle which is followed in the villages is more pro-environmental than the city lifestyle.
Fantastic.
So that's why maybe there is not a municipality which is following.
Population, systems, and lifestyle. One more point we have in the back. Go ahead, don't wait for the mic. We will save time. I have only 10 minutes.
So the community,
Okay.
I won't be able to get up. The community guidelines are more close-knit, and the value for community building is more pro-nature and easily followed in a village area.
Community relationship without a document, right? That's what you are saying. Fantastic. And then the lady who wanted to say something, I can't kill her voice.
Okay, it is.
I don't know how right this is for
Don't
the
worry
kind
for
of.
the right wrong.
Okay. I also feel that compared to the city life and the village life that we're talking about, the amount of political influence as well as, I don't want to say corruption, but if it's a lack of the better word, corruption, it's,
Feel free, say it if it is there.
yes. So I think city life has much of it and villages don't. So it's also, they're all of it are collectively working towards a
Right.
certain goal. And I don't
Right.
think that's there in the city life.
It's a community feeling which is clean inside, right? That's what you want to say. Okay. Thank you so much. Unless there is any other hand who is excited to share more. But I think I got my answer and you gave the answer. You don't need a municipality in a village because that is already sustainable. We are we need a municipality in a city because that is not sustainable. And that's the difference I wanted to create on. Now, if you compare a village and a city system, you're going to learn what sustainability is, where are the gaps, which are the individual and institutional mechanisms contributing to either increasing it or solving it. So if you want to solve something, create a problem and then solve it, right? Villages don't have it. I remember when I used to go for shopping, I always had a bag in my hand. Today, I don't carry this because over a period of time, I'm trained not to carry it so that I can buy a polythene bag in the market and carry something back home. Now, changing that habit is very difficult for me. Have you heard of, I'm sorry, I don't know that term in English, exact term, but have you heard of angocha? The cotton piece, usually male have on their head, village people keep it, angocha, right? There are 27 usage of this piece of cloth. Did you ever hear about it? 27 methods you can use an angocha, that cotton piece, and that was not told by an Indian, that was told to us by a German. That is sustainability. We have those methods in place. We have those actions in place. We need to appreciate, we need to have confidence in the methods and actions and the systems and the mechanism and the institutions of our own indigenous. The European system and the American system is coming from a different framework and the assumption. And what do I mean by framework and assumption? They have a different lifestyle. Somebody said lifestyle. That is key word I'm picking up right now. When the lifestyle of a society is different, accordingly, you create mechanisms. Where is my time? Accordingly, you create mechanisms and methods to behave in the society and deliver in the society. Asia is not fit location to adopt the European and American systems. I have worked with Jeffrey Sachs, who is, as a professor, he's a powerhouse, the Harvardian and a Columbian, because I launched one master's program in collaboration with Columbia University. I worked with Anupam Bajpayee, who was the conceptualizer of Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan in the country during the Prime Minister Bajpayee Saab. I've seen them thinking on how issue is resolved. They are fantastic. But what we did not learn from them is that we need to contextualize it in the setup we are in. Okay? So if we are looking towards a sustainable future, try to learn in your studentship how to contextualize the knowledge that you are receiving. Don't go by the book. Don't go by the practice. Don't go by verbatim. Try to contextualize the knowledge that you're having. If you are in Ghaziabad, see, can you implement that from this kind of context? If you are in Mumbai, try to understand, can you really come out with the thought process which fits to Mumbai kind of city? Contextualization and testing your assumptions is about solving a problem. The COPs will continue to happen. The solar associations will continue to happen. We are solving poverty and hunger and all these problems from last 70 years. We have not done it yet. In the UN report in 2012, I found UN has managed through governments spending more than $100 $50 billion US dollar, but we could not reach to, the solution that we wanted. These mechanisms are good helping hands, but they cannot resolve the problem of the local community. That has to be contextualized. So if action plan has to be thought of for a future, sustainable future, the points which are raised by Mr. Parth is absolutely correct. We need to list down all those problems as a problem, but solutions will come from looking at very polite method of delivering something which is very, very contextual, regional, indigenous. Foreign methods, and when I'm saying foreign, I don't mean only outside India. What is going to work in Kerala will not work in UP or Bihar or Gurgaon. Okay, so foreign methods are not sufficiently, not equipped, not capable to be giving you solutions at the local level. This is all I wanted to share in my message to you. The institutional and individual responsibilities should appreciate assumptions in the context, allow institutions to work the way they work, like municipality, but motivate individuals to take those responsibilities which are their responsibilities. Don't leave everything on the institution. If both function, you have a sustainable future. Otherwise, guaranteed, you will never have it. We will continue discussing it. Thank you very much. We'll catch up.
Thank you, Professor Rahul. Now, I think we can take some questions. So I would request the student community. Yeah. So the volunteers can pass on the mics. Please introduce yourself and then address your question to the particular panelist.
Hi, I'm Keertana, and I had a question for Mr. Parth. First of all, thank you for commenting on the intersections of the environment and various aspects of mental health, because that's so pertinent to the conference. But also that got me thinking about the intersectionalities of SDGs. And I was wondering, as someone who works with the government, how does this impact, the way you advise the government? Do you treat these goals separately? Because like you said, the government has certain goals to fulfill, or do you take these intersectionalities into account, considering, you spoke about sanitation and how it impacts climate change. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Thank you. And I think that's a great question. So as UNDP, various other UN agencies. So, UNESCO works with children and women. UNICEF, I'm sorry. UNESCO works on art and culture. WHO works on health. So as UNDP, our role, if we summarize, is of something what we call an SDG integrator. So being cross-cutting for us is not an option, but it's rather that just comes as you work on policy or even implementing some of these initiatives on the ground. So if I give you an example, for example, consider biodiversity conservation. Now, if I have to protect, say, a tiger population or a leopard population, I also have to be cognizant of the fact that this animal might be venturing into villages and killing livestock and harming people. So then this issue of biodiversity conservation is an issue of livelihoods and rather the safety of human beings as well. So what do I do then? So, and I have to protect the biodiversity as well. So to give an example, in Ladakh, what happens is, and someone I think was mentioned Ladakh in the previous session as well, snow leopard conflict is a major issue because resources are scarce and most of the villages, there's very little farming and livestock is a major source of income. Now, when a snow leopard ventures into a pen where there are about 60 to 80 sheep, the animal wants to probably kill one or two sheep for its food, but it ends up killing almost close to 30, 40 because most of the other animals die of heart attack or simply of shock. So now this is a species that is vulnerable. So what we've done there is we've looked at this issue from a human wildlife conflict perspective. So they have this pen, they have this enclosure. Now what you do is you simply put a wire mesh on top of this enclosure so that the snow leopard cannot enter. So what that does is, one, it saves the livestock, so it protects the livelihood of the villager. It also improves the attitude of the villager towards the snow leopard. It does not see the animal as a threat. So therefore, if I want to involve this villager in conservation activities, if I want him to tell me how many times a snow leopard ventures into around their villages so I can estimate their population, I can make them a stakeholder in conservation. So that is one. Another important aspect that I'd like to highlight is, for example, you have most of these mountain regions only, you have army camps in most of the border areas. Now, these camps generate a lot of food wastage. So, which is just wet waste, food that is thrown away because they have their own systems in place. If food has to be cooked for an X number of people, they'll cook it for X number of people, no matter if those many people aren't there or not. Most of this waste is thrown outside. Now, what that does it, that breeds a feral dog population. And what these dogs do is these dogs are a threat to the surrounding wildlife. So we've had cases where these dogs can become pack hunters. They can even chase after wolves or snow leopards, and they attack humans. They attack kids. So it becomes a, so what is a waste management issue becomes a conservation issue. And these dogs now also can sometimes breed with wolves in the wild. So they create a genetic imbalance, and they might also be passing on diseases to wildlife. And from wildlife, these diseases might come back to humans, which was what COVID was. It was a zoonotic disease. So it's a simple issue of wet waste being thrown out, but that has led to an issue that is harming biodiversity and that is possibly increasing the risk of zoonotic diseases. So we, to answer your question, yes, we look at the intersectionality, but that is something that comes as an obvious choice and not something that we have to force ourselves to do. So I'll stop here. Yeah. I hope to answer your question.
So before I move to the next question, let me also continue and have a small query because you are representing international organization that is UNDP. So I have this question always in my mind that we recently had COP27 and before that Paris climate meet and all those things. And we are really talking about now the question of climate finance. And I think it's very clear with the help of data. Means it's been established that basically the rich, the developed nations are really contributing to the damage to the climate and all historically. So, but when I read the reports and all that, somehow it is so difficult to convince these developed countries and rich countries, to finance what they have done to the environment, and because of that, probably the less developed countries or developing countries are also suffering. So why it is so difficult to convince? I mean, somehow the mechanism has still not been in place where we can say, okay, the Germanys of the world or the UKs of the world or USs of the world is going to contribute, and then helping the developing and the least developed countries, to develop the technology mechanism and mechanism. So I'm always curious to know about this. So maybe you can throw some light on that.
Okay, so that's probably a very sticky wicket because international diplomacy, as you know, it's a very long drawn process. But what happens is, see, what we've done right now is we've been able to convince the developed countries because I mean, there's no option; they can see it. We've had a heat wave in Europe. Who would have thought? We've had wildfires, so they can't escape it. It's there for everyone to see. And in terms of finance, what has happened was during the Paris Agreement, the developed nations promised that we'll provide about $100 billion a year for developing and underdeveloped nations to be able to grow in a climate resilient manner. And that finance hasn't come. We have not really realized $100 billion per year. And now we kind of assume that we need much more with natural disasters, with COVID literally wiped out the global economy clean in a matter of weeks. So, and most of these countries are still recovering. And what I'd also try to like is to decode climate finance. See, climate finance is nothing but regular finance which is deployed in ways that are environmentally sustainable. So if you ask me what is climate finance, I should be given finance to probably create more renewable energy projects at a lower interest rate. I should be given more money to do that. I should probably be able to create green buildings, green infrastructure. I should probably been given money to offset or to reduce the subsidies that I give on fossil fuels. The biggest, because what is happening is our kitty of money will be limited. So we have to stop investing them into industries or into processes that are not climate friendly and bring that money to processes that are climate friendly, which is easier said than done because see, there are development constraints as well. So at the last year's COP, there was a major issue around the term phase down and phase out. So most of the developed countries were pushing for a phase out of coal, but India and a few other countries is what they say is diluted it down to say phase down. Now, at the face of it, it seems simple. But if you say phase out, and if you say phase out by this year, that means you're hard bound by this agreement. And suppose if there's another COVID pandemic and I need to use coal to generate electricity to power my hospitals, then what do I do? So this is where there's a sort of a tug of war between the developing and the developed nations, and for us that is why, and I think as Amitabh Kant, who was the G20 Sherpa, often puts it, India is actually doing quite good. We will be probably the first country, one of the largest developing economies that will be decarbonizing as it grows. So as we are developing, our renewable energy capacities are also increasing. Our coal consumption is increasing, but the rate of increase is slowing down. So eventually, we should be able to stop coal usage. And see, because what that does is if I stop using coal and if I say I'll only go solar from now on, or then I'll have to probably import more energy, and that energy might be coming from coal or fuel in the first place. So for me to stop using coal and then getting a service from outside my borders that is fueled by fossil fuels is a contradiction in itself. So, and at the biodiversity COP is I think there's a similar issue that is going on, that how can a developing country with an increasing population manage to increase its biodiversity targets while also meeting its development goals. So, I mean, there was a lot of talk about village lifestyles being sustainable, but we must also realize that village lifestyles for villagers are not very aspirational. And as a human being, as a villager, if I want to have access to 24/7 electricity, I want to have access to mobility, I want to have a bigger house with proper sanitation facilities, all of that will increase their carbon footprint. But for them, it's an aspirational way of living. It's something that we deal with. And I would kind of like to segue into the lifestyle for environment movement or life, which the Prime Minister had announced at the Glasgow COP last year. And this, in a way, is India's answer to the developed world, saying that, see, my per capita carbon footprint, even right now, is very little as compared to what the average carbon footprint of a person in a developed country is. And you'd be surprised to know that about, I think, almost two-thirds or around of our emissions are actually household related. So even if it's the process that is industrial, if I'm buying 20 pairs of clothes per year and it's 3,000 liters of water per unit of cloth, then it's also because I'm buying it. That's why the industry is manufacturing it. That is why there are emissions. If I am driving, as I did, which I'm guilty of doing so, then it's a choice that I'm paying. I'm having that luxury and I am emitting. So probably that is something that I need to do as an individual. It's not the responsibility of a government. It's not the responsibility of the developed world to provide me money to do that, for example. So this issue of climate finance is largely intergovernmental in nature, but we also need to complement it what we do as a society. So we cannot, as Indians, say we are a developed country, so we will emit more. we also have to be mindful of the fact that it's not sustainable for us to do so, because I will also suffer. I am facing natural disasters. I am facing heat waves. And right now I can pay for more electricity. I can get more air conditioners installed, but pretty sure there'll be an electricity shortage. And then I will also be forced to acknowledge this. So this lifestyle for environment is an important initiative. I think that's India led, but the approach or the vision is kind of global. That as a society too, we need to reduce our carbon footprint. We need to have an austerity in our consumption patterns to be able to meet our climate goals. Just climate finance will not be enough. That will be for projects for to probably build more electric vehicles, to create more renewable energy capacity, to build more disaster resilient infrastructure. But at an individual level, it's not really about climate finance. It's more about climate action from us as individuals. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I believe a lot of participants have joined us online, and they also have a few questions to ask. So probably I would request Priyesh, sir. Dr. Priyesh.
Thank you for the session, sir. So we have a question from a participant. The question is, what kind of government policies are being deployed to bring corporates under the scanner who are causing major pollution?
So maybe I can request Professor Rahul, if you can.
You can take.
Dr. Priyesh, can you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. I repeat the question. What kind of government policies are being deployed to bring corporates under the scanner who are causing major pollution?
Thank you so much. I think this is very good input on at least how the change is happening or transformation towards sustainability is happening. And I'll take one example, the solar and the waste to connect it, which will also help understanding circular economy. So in waste management, government has come up with a policy where it is forcing or asking companies to have their own waste management setup. For example, at a very small level, sugar factories are expected to have their own waste management system. Otherwise, sugar factories used to produce a lot of waste, which was spread earlier around wherever they are, and something was sold to cosmetic firms, right? Now, these sugar companies, and they were having hardly any money out of it. Now, these sugar factories are having their own waste management systems, converting their waste into profit. So earlier, they were not able to recover the waste management process cost. Now they are making money, which means they are not only generating energy to run their machines out of this waste, but also, whatever is sellable are being sold to cosmetic companies. So they have suddenly reduced about 40 to 50% of the power expenditure of a sugar factory because of the waste process. Policy is a great catalyst in India. Wherever companies, it is always everywhere, I understand, that economics concept, but in India, it has worked very well. And I gave you just one example. This is the way things have started changing because of the policy pressure. Now there is another policy which is introduced by SEBI, if you have heard of integrated reporting on sustainability. Yeah, 1,000 companies have to report their sustainability in accounting format, which means you have to mention it. The policy on CSR in India, India became the first country in the world to bring in policy on CSR reporting by the companies. And India became a successful case study for the world. The world was watching towards India, what is going to be the reaction of the companies. It became a case study. So there are a couple of examples where how policy changes a positive change or brings a positive change in the institutional mechanism, either on the corporate side or social side. Do I answer you?
I think certainly, sir. Because of paucity of time, probably we can take one more question. Okay, yeah, please.
Okay, I thought I'll just add to it. I'd actually 2-3 point note this down. So as Dr. Singh rightly mentioned, CSR, I think India is perhaps one of the only or one of the very few countries that has such a framework in place. In addition to CSR, there's also what we call the extended producer responsibility. And this is especially who are in the business of, say, generating plastic or other such waste materials. So there it says, so CSR can be, so I can be an IT firm who can be working for women empowerment. With EPR, to give an example, if I am a Coca-Cola, for example, and I produce a lot of plastic. So I have the responsibility to recycle that plastic to a certain extent. So I'm supposed to pay the government or set up waste recovery facilities, support their operation and maintenance to ensure that the plastic waste is managed. When you look at large industrial projects, you have the environmental impact assessment processes. So any manufacturing unit, any infrastructure development project goes through an environmental impact assessment process. A lot of the times that is questionable, but let's see, it's a policy framework and it will take some time for it to become completely foolproof. Then there's also, sir, Mr. SEBI has the BRSR framework in place where now businesses, in addition to their impacts on climate in terms of emissions, they also have to report on their impact on biodiversity, which is kind of big because what usually happens is in the environment circle, we are generally focusing emissions and focusing less on biodiversity, complex and a more interrelated subject. And if there is biodiversity, there'll be climate change. If there is climate change, there'll be biodiversity loss. So it's the two are very deeply intertwined. There is also a system or a mechanism called access and benefit sharing, or ABS. It is a part of the Nagoya Protocol that was established by the parties to the biodiversity, the Convention on Biological Diversity. Now, what that says is, if I am a company and I access a genetic resource, even if I'm a research institution and I use that genetic resource to develop a product from which I'm earning a revenue, then I'm supposed to pay the community who has been guarding that resource for centuries an amount to as a measure to help them to protect this genetic resource. And this is usually the case with pharma or the FMCG companies or the cosmetic companies, because I might be deriving a genetic compound from a plant which I may be using to make a medicine from which I'm earning revenue. Now, where that plant is found, there is usually a community that is in guarding the grove or guarding the forest or a government department. So I'm supposed to pay a certain amount to these agencies or institutions or communities to be able to protect these resources for posterity. So I either go to the National Biodiversity Authority if I'm a foreign firm, I apply for a permit, or I go to the State Biodiversity Board. So these are some of the nuanced policy instruments that are there to ensure that there are enough resources to protect our biodiversity and also ensure that we meet our climate targets.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parth. I think I'm afraid we have this much time only. So let me wrap up the session and let me express my deep sense of gratitude to both Professor Rahul and Mr. Parth for their excellent presentation. And I believe the student community here, the research community, researchers, distinguished faculty member, all of us have taken benefit out of this, very interesting and powerful deliberation. I think both the presenters have brought their experience, their knowledge to the forefront and given us a lot of input, examples, case study, where I believe the student community, us, the faculty member here, can take advantage of it and maybe, utilize some of it maybe in our future research purpose, or some of you in your CIAs, right? So I would like to thank you once again for coming and sharing your knowledge, wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sirs. It was indeed an insightful session for all of us. Now, I would like to request Dr. Sonali Mukherjee to felicitate Mr. Parth Joshi with the planter. Thank you, sir. With this, we'll wrap up this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now you can all please resume with the lunch, and our sessions will start from 1:30.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the afternoon session post lunch. Right now, we have with us expert speaker Mr. Joydeep Gupta, South Asian Director, the Third Pole. And with us, we have moderator Dr. Prabha. We welcome you both. Dr. Prabha, Assistant Professor of English, Department of English, Cultural Studies, poet, editor, and bilingual translator. She has published her Anthropology of Poem in Malayalam and has so far 8 full-length book translations and many story translation to her credit. She has previously worked as an editor at Cambridge University Press, Hyderabad, and Sage Publication, Delhi. She has completed her MPhil from English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, and has submitted her PhD to Jawaharlal Nehru, Delhi. We welcome you, ma'am, and like you to come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. It is my privilege to introduce Mr. Joydeep Gupta here. He is the Southeast Asia Director of the Third Pole. I would say it was fortunate that the event got delayed slightly. I had the good opportunity to have a very brief conversation with sir as well, to my delight. Joydeep Gupta writes and commissions articles on climate change, biodiversity, pollution, and sustainable development for the bilingual environmental news website, The Third Pole. He is a lead trainer at workshops for environmental journalists from South Asia and Southeast Asia. Gupta covered the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, UN climate summits in Bali, Poznan, Copenhagen, Cancun, Durban, and Paris, and the Biodiversity Summit in Nagoya. He has reported for Indo-Asian News Service, The Statesman, The Sunday Observer, and Sunday Mail. He is the Vice President of the Forum of Environmental Journalists in India. For his contributions to environmental journalism, Mr. Gupta won the 2012 Green Globe Award at the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit. Joydeep teaches development journalism to postgraduate students at Jamia Millia Islamia University in New Delhi and holds a master's in environmental economics and environmental management from the University of York. We very warmly welcome you to the stage, sir, and to Christ University. Thank you for your presence, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Prabha, and thanks a lot to Christ University for calling me over. Now, I think those fulsome words of introduction have hopefully established two things. One is, I'm not a teacher. I'm not used to lecturing. I'm a journalist. I'm far happier sitting there than being here. And second, I hope it is also established that I'm a dinosaur. I've been at this for so long that I can easily claim to be from an earlier age altogether. So what I'm going to do now is to misuse the privilege of age. And instead of talking to you, I wish to listen to you. I hope I'll be able to do that. There is a specific reason why I want to listen to you. As Dr. Prabha said, I'm a practicing journalist. I write about the impacts of environmental issues on people's lives. And when I write about the impact of environmental issues on people's lives, I almost always end up writing about the impact on their physical lives, their livelihoods, their respiratory health in the case of pollution, their ability to deal with heat waves, which are becoming more frequent and more severe due to climate change. I write on how more and more girls should learn swimming because floods are becoming more frequent and more severe due to climate change. And we are seeing a very large number of deaths due to drowning in floods. What I don't write about half as often as I would like to do, because I don't get that information, is the impact of environmental changes on mental health. This is why I was quite excited when I got this invite from the Department of Psychology, because this is something I wish to explore. Whatever little I know of the impact of environmental issues on mental health, whatever little I've reported or commissioned articles on, tells me that the impact is quite severe, but under-researched and under-reported. Especially now that we are effectively in a climate changed era, where impacts of climate change are already showing up. So what I'm going to do now is to tell you a story that we published and then seek your feedback. All of you are going to be psychologists. Many of you are going to be clinical psychologists. So think of yourselves as somebody who may actually find a patient like this. And I want to hear what you are going to do. So here's the story. This actually happened in northern Pakistan, but could have happened anywhere in the Himalayas. So there was a village which faced flash floods because due to climate change, the glaciers melted too fast above the village and it came roaring down the mountainside and there were flash floods. And about 80 houses were washed away. And where those houses were, there is now a lake. Not many people died because they had some warning that there was a flood coming. They all ran. And then they were relocated by the local government to another village, approximately 5 kilometers away. The reason why this, by the way, is something that's happening so often now in the Himalayas, and in whether it's in India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, that it's no longer news, unfortunately. What made this news was that the authorities realized after some time that their local primary health centers were very quickly running out of all tranquilizing medicines, all sleeping pills, all nerve soothers. So some researchers went and started trying to figure out what was going on. And they found that well over half the women of that village who had lost their homes were spending the entire day going back to the site of their old village, sitting on that lakeside, and essentially doing nothing but looking at the lake waters where their homes used to be. And they couldn't sleep, and their husbands were worried enough to take them to the local primary health center where they were regularly being prescribed soothing pills and sleeping pills. You would know the terms far better than I would. So here's my question, and please raise your hands and give me a response. If you were in charge of the primary health centers, mental health issues, how would you handle it? I'm waiting for a show of hands. No? Yeah, please.
Hello. Yeah. So, for my understanding of what has just happened, it does seem a little bit like the women, at least of the village, are going through some process of a grief cycle because they lost something. They lost homes. It's not that they lost people, but they lost homes. So it's a kind of a grief process, and it seems that it might be in the first stage. So at least for beginners, I would not probably prescribe sleeping pills at get-go. If, of course, it's physically harming them, then it might be required. But otherwise, dealing with that grief, dealing with that trauma that comes with that grief, and getting them from the first stage, which is denial, to the last stage, which is acceptance that, yes, this thing happened, we lost homes, and this is our reality now. Getting them to that acceptance so that they can move away from the past and more towards the present is where I would at least focus on.
Any other response, anyone? Yeah, I can see a hand at the back.
So I definitely agree with her answer that they would have to go through a process where they can deal with the grief that they're going through. But additionally, I think focusing on the strengths that they have or some of the positive aspects, as you said, they still are mostly around the people that they still have. I mean, the family or friends. That is definitely a positive thing that they can make use of. So that would be one. Also, since you said that this is an area where this happens rather often, I think equipping them with strategies where they can deal with this kind of a situation in case it does happen again would also be something I would prioritize.
Anyone else? Yes, I understand. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's working now. So Aranya and I, we are presenting a paper on place attachment, and basically what you were talking about talks about place attachment, that the women go back to the place where their house used to be by the lakeside. So maybe after they've dealt with their grief and the trauma, we could focus on community activities, community building and attachment to the place. So apart from individual counseling, also focusing on the community development and social well-being and neighborhood ties with each other. So it basically helps them have a better sense of neighborhood and better attachment to the new place where they have moved to. So yeah, that's about it. More community interventions also.
Yes, actually, that's an important point. I've noticed this, that quite often when there is, I don't know what your technical term is, but I would call it group trauma. When an entire, say, 20 households have been washed away, 20 homes have been washed away in a flood. Fairly common in our country, unfortunately, and getting more common. Then, yes, there is physical rehabilitation that takes place. Governments do that. But far too often, the mental health aspect is not taken care of. And I wanted to actually bring this to your notice before I started talking about the subject that was given to me as to whether media can be a catalyst for clean and sustainable society. Now, media can be a catalyst for anything. It can be a catalyst for good, bad, indifferent, frivolous, serious. And I would not even presume to speak for all media. It's far too big and far too heterogeneous an animal for me to be able to define it like that. Instead, I would talk about the possibilities. Now, we are today living in an era, and all of you especially are going to live most of your lives in an era that will have very little in common with what has happened in the past, say, 50, 60, 70 years. You'll find yourselves in a situation, and it will be in some ways gradual and in some ways not so gradual, but the environment around you will change. It's already changing, and the pace of change is accelerating. And there, how to optimize that change so that you can live your personal and professional lives in the most satisfactory manner possible. That, I think, is what your faculty had in mind when they talked about media as a catalyst for a clean and sustainable society. It's possible. Of course, it's desirable. But beyond that, it's possible for media to play that role. It's important for that, for not just the media, but also very, very importantly for all of you, for the consumers of the media, Because the media doesn't exist in a vacuum. The media exists because you are looking at your phone to see what's going on. You're listening to podcasts. You're watching television. Maybe you are even reading newspapers. That is why the media exists. And definitely that is why the social media exists. No response, no social media. No response, very little media. So, how you, as media consumers, want to move your society to a very large extent determines what the media does. No journalist will ever report on something that is completely out of the news, not because he or she doesn't want to do so, but because they know that there will be no takers for it. If there is no audience, there's no point in doing a report. To have a clean and sustainable society in the news, it's important for those who are consuming the news to voice that demand. It is being voiced today far more than it was, let us say, 40 years ago. And that is why you are seeing a lot more coverage of environmental issues. But it's probably not enough. When I talk to young journalists about your age, maybe 1 or 2 years older, who have just entered the profession, I hear one sentence. And that sentence is, climate change is the biggest story of this century. So, how do we cover it? That's a question often thrown at me. So, there are journalists, researchers, and people who are not directly in this profession who are aware that climate change is the biggest story of the century. And the reason it is the biggest story of the century is that it is already changing energy, economics, livelihoods, lifestyle, just society. And that is why I started with an example of changes in mental health. It's changing everything. It is being reported. It will be reported more often. There is no doubt about that, as the impacts become more and more obvious to everybody. Whether that kind of reportage has the kind of impact is up to you. Media can only at best be a catalyst. But you people are scientists. You know a catalyst can trigger a reaction, but cannot complete the reaction. The raw materials are required to complete the reaction. And you are the raw material. You are the ones who have to make that, produce that reaction for a clean and sustainable society, if that is what you want. And the reason I use this last phrase is that nowadays I often hear, especially at this time of the year, I often hear, oh yeah, Delhi NCR the pollution is just too bad. I'm coughing. It's horrible. You will often hear this in your canteens, in parties, in drawing rooms in the evening. And then people will get into their SUVs and drive home. It doesn't help. There is a requirement to make it more basic, more intrinsic part of our lifestyle. Media can be a catalyst, pointing out that yes, these are the impacts of vehicular pollution. Media can be a catalyst in saying these are the alternatives available today. Whether the media consumer therefore changes his or her transport habits is not something the media can do much about. In fact, they can do very little about it. So, whether the media can be a catalyst for a clean and sustainable society is ultimately dependent on you. I'm going to say just one more thing about why I think it's important to have a sustainable society. Because today, in our country, we are already facing a situation where human development is slipping. Globally, 2007 was a very important year for a very unfortunate reason. Because 2007 was globally the year when, for the first time since the end of the Second World War, the Human Development Index showed a decline rather than an advance. It had not yet hit the developed countries or the large developing countries like India, China, Brazil, South Africa. It had already hit the smaller countries, and the global average was being pulled down. Now it's hitting us. Now it's hitting us in ways that are absolutely fundamental. In fact, sometimes so fundamental that we don't stop to think about them. So, a prolonged heat wave over here will mean fewer classes, fewer of you being able to come to class, more of you falling ill in summer. And that's only one of the many impacts. Urban flooding. And when you have these impacts at a larger societal scale, people who are directly dependent on the environment for their livelihoods are hit far worse than people like you and me who have some cushion. When you go out in Ghaziabad on a May afternoon and complain about the heat, think of the fellow who's pedaling your cycle rickshaw. He does not have the option of withdrawing, at least for some time, in a place like this, where the temperature is controlled. When it rains a lot in August or September, and for you, or for me, it's a matter of a little bit of irritation. Okay, I may not be able to go out today for a meeting I planned to go to. I may not be able to, I may have to miss a party. I don't want to miss a party. But for the farmer right behind your campus, it means a lot more. It means losing the season's investment. Same with drought. I don't want to bore you with more and more examples. I just wanted to give you a couple in the hope of impressing upon you that changes in the environment hit us in very fundamental ways, and they're hitting us in very fundamental ways now. Media can point that out. It does its work, it should do more, there's no doubt about it, but it's not as if it's not doing it. So, in its way, the media is working as a catalyst to the extent that it can. Whether that actually leads to a clean and sustainable society is up to you. Thank you.
Sir, I do have a question. Now, when we are talking to psychologists, they are budding psychologists, and they will be out in the field talking to people very soon. And do you think their first question is, do you think there is a disconnect between practitioners and policymakers? Right. And also, I understand that media can be a catalyst there as well to bridge that gap. Another question is, as aspiring psychologists, how can they address these, identify these concerns if there are ecological and environmental concerns affecting people's mental health? And how can they raise awareness, address it, bring it to rather a policy making level? How do they do that, if you can?
Yeah, thanks. That's an important question. Yes, as somebody who will be practicing psychology within a year or two, you have a very important role to play in this. And yeah, and because I can assure you one thing, journalists are desperately looking for good academic literature on mental health impacts of changes in the environment, and they're not getting it. We are not getting enough. And if you research on that, if you work on that, I can assure you that that will get reported. And as Dr. Prabha quite correctly pointed out, it's part of the media's catalytic role to bridge the gap between practitioners and policymakers. And they will bring that to the policymakers' table. That the impacts that we are seeing now is not only on the body, but also on the mind. It's the media that has brought the physical impacts to the policymakers' table over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Otherwise, whatever policies you are seeing right now, you wouldn't have seen. India now has some very, very major policies in moving towards a cleaner and greener economy. We have the world's largest renewable energy program. And this wouldn't have happened without reportage, without people bringing to the fore the impacts of changes in the environment and what can be done about it. So yes, media has and is continuing and will continue to play its catalytic role in bridging that gap between practitioners and policymakers in the area of physical health. It needs more ammunition to play that role in that area of mental health. And that's the ammunition that you psychologists can provide.
Sir, I have one more request to you. I know they are all working on research papers and they are practicing research writing. They have all of that happening. But I personally feel that it's also important to write polemically about mental health, connecting environment, or otherwise also about mental health. So, as a veteran journalist, what do you have for them if they are to engage in polemical writing? What advice do you have to them?
My first piece of advice is that you people, if you should probably do some classes in your new journalism department. And the reason for that is that when you look, when you write for academic journals, that has its own logic and a perfectly good logic. When you write a paper for an academic journal, you write an abstract, then you have a thesis, then you have the methodology you have used, then have put in the antithesis and demolish that, and then you synthesize the results. It's a logical flow. And you do that flow with the certainty that somebody is going to read it and that somebody is interested in the subject and therefore will go through my logical steps and read the whole thing. You cannot be sure of that when you are writing for the media. That is why writing for the media has a different structure altogether. And that is why I'm suggesting that you go to the journalism department. The teachers in the journalism department will tell you that it's called the inverted pyramid. In an inverted pyramid, you put the most important thing right on top, the next second most important thing below that, and progressively like that. Because even at no point can you assume that your reader will read the whole thing. So if your reader is reading only the first paragraph, you want your reader to get the most important point. If your reader is going to read the first two paragraphs, you want your reader to get the two most important points. So the way we write for mass media is structurally different from the way we write for academic papers. And it's important. You people are all postgraduate students, I understand. At this stage, it's very important for you to understand that difference. Because, yes, I'm sure you will all want to write and continue to write for academic journals. But if you want to be policy relevant, if you want to be policy influencers, you'll have to go beyond the academic journals. And for you to be policy influencers, therefore, you'll have to use the method that will really influence policy. And that's to put the most important thing right on top.
Thank you so much, sir. Do we have any more questions? I think there is one question over there.
Sir, I have a two-part question for you. These questions are coming not from someone who's studying psychology, but strictly from a consumer point of view. I have a slightly controversial take on the topic itself. We're writing something like media acting as a catalyst for clean and sustainable society. I would like to know your opinion on how far do you think media is even involved in informing about environmental related issues, especially considering in mind the bias and the selective journalism that is prevalent throughout the country across all forms of media, let it be broadcast or print media. Recently, I think Caravan and a lot of other magazines have also covered this particular issue, that even something as trivial as natural disasters that are happening in the northeastern states are not covered at all, as compared to some really small earthquake that happens in Delhi with absolutely no casualties at all. So I would like to know, uh, is there a lax with respect to media even informing us about environmental related issues? And how far can we say that it's doing an effective job as a catalyst in today's socio-political climate?
Well, I agree with you. That is why, right in the beginning, I said I have no intention of defending the media as such, if you call the whole animal in one group, because you cannot put that whole animal in one group. It's far too heterogeneous. I'm talking about responsible, honest journalists. I'm very glad to report to you that despite the overwhelming impression that people have, at least half the journalists in India are responsible and honest. I cannot speak for the other half. I cannot defend the other half. I have no wish to defend the other half. But there is reason to be concerned, but there is no reason to be so despondent that nothing can improve, nothing can happen. And there is every reason to strengthen the hands of honest journalists who want to do professional work. Because as you quite correctly point out, they're suffering because of the overall impression that we now have that the media is corrupt, it's frivolous, it is urban centric, all of which is true, but not totally true. To make that less and less true, there are many journalists working on it, but they need the audience to respond. If a completely rubbishy story on some Bollywood starlet is going to get 1 million retweets, while an important story on the impact of climate change on agriculture in Uttar Pradesh gets 100, then it doesn't work. And it's not the media that can create those 1 million retweets, it's the audience that can. So yes, there is reason to worry, but there is no reason yet to basically sit back and die. No, we will not do that. We shall fight back.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your expertise and your time, sir. Sir, you may be seated. I wish to invite Dr. Priyesh to conclude the session. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Joydeep Gupta. It was a wonderful session, and I'm sure that you have provided us with all your experience and given a versatile session here for our audience here, offline and online. So with this, we come to a conclusion to the session. Before we finish the session, I would like to felicitate our speaker for the day. So I would like to request Dr. Sneha Saha, our conference convener, to felicitate our speaker for this session, Mr. Joydeep Gupta, with a small memento. Thank you so much, sir, for taking your time and giving us your knowledge. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Dr. Sneha Saha to give a small memento to our moderator for the session, Dr. Prabha Zacharias. Thank you, ma'am, for coming as a moderator and facilitating a wonderful discussion here during this session. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, dear audience, for your patient listening and for your questions. And I'm sure this session has triggered a lot of ideas and questions in your mind. So take it forward and do the change that you can from your side, and let's make it happen. Thank you so much, all of you. And with this, we finish the expert session here and we move to the scientific tracks. We have 15 parallel tracks that's going to happen simultaneously. So you can go and choose your simultaneous tracks that you're interested in, and please continue the academic sessions. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Downstate Medical Center, Brooklyn, New York. She worked on as an assistant professor and conducted research in the field of addiction, in particularly alcoholism. Dr. Rangaswamy has now published over 50 publications in national and international journals, and she has 7 book chapters. Following her return to India, she teaches cognitive psychology and electrophysiology, that is MAM's specialization. And this is for the master's students in clinical psychology program at Christ University Bangalore campus. Also is a mentor for master's and doctoral students in the topics ranging from cognition, adolescent development, and environmental psychology. So with this brief introduction, I would want to welcome you, ma'am, for this session. And I would request you to take over the session and please introduce this the day and proceed ahead. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Priyesh, for introducing me and such warm words. I would like to not waste too much time and welcome our 2 panelists here. Our first speaker for the day is Dr. Maria Palazzo, who is an associate professor at the Universitas Mercatorum in Italy. Previously, she was a researcher and lecturer at the Department of Political and Communication Studies in University of Salerno, which is also in Italy, and a member of the Sustainable Communication Center, which is a research think tank which works on all the the very interesting topics related to the influence of culture and sustainability of the communication in business and branding and such related topics. Now, Dr. Palazzo has also lectured in universities in the UK, Spain, and also in Colombia in South America. She has written extensively on topics like sustainability communication, branding, and other topics, and her articles have been published in leading international journals, including Corporate Social Responsibility and Environmental Management, Quality Market Research, and International Journal, and several other journals. And today she will be the first speaker talking to us about sustainable packaging and consumer behavior. And I think with this, I would like to invite Dr. Maria, our other second speaker, Dr. Tyler Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, I will introduce you in greater detail just prior to your presentation. All right. So the floor is yours, Dr. Palazzo. Please go ahead. We are all waiting to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor. And I'm really happy to join you today. And also, the University of Salerno is very happy to be a partner of this event. So I'm going to give you just several insights about sustainable packaging. And I hope that if you have a question and feedback, you can get in touch with me by email. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I will just give some insight about the road, the map of, and the objective of this brief presentation with an introduction, conceptual background, the methodology, findings and conclusion, and then future research agenda that I hope you can develop with me further later on. Okay, when we talk about sustainable packaging, we have to understand that this is a complex field of study. And of course, in this field, there are different kind of definition for sustainable packaging. Different authors, in fact, they do not only focus on sustainable packaging itself, but it also try to understand that the link that exists between sustainable packaging, active packaging, interactive packaging, intelligent packaging, and ergonomic packaging. What kind of, so these are just few examples. For example, you have got Coca-Cola that have, that show, for example, when the drink is cold or when it's not, or for example, there are other kind of elements that you can find on packaging that can show you if the food is fresh or not. Or for example, there are code and other kind of codes that can help when it comes with wasting. So when you have to choose where to put the package in the different bins. Or for example, the interactive packaging is also about having more contents that can allow the consumers to be engaged with the brand. This is just an example of Cornetto Agida, that is ice cream very well known in Italy. Okay, so considering the definition of these topics, we can say that several authors, they just analyze the active packaging as a packaging which change the perception, but also it try also to extend the life shell or improve the safety or sensory properties, considering the goods that is packed with this item. Or others say that active packaging involves the incorporation of several elements into packaging system with the aim of maintaining or extending product quality and shelf life. Other research, moreover, add that intelligent packaging is seen as the systems attached as labels incorporated into or printed onto a packaging material offer enhanced possibility to monitor product quality, trace the critical points, and give more detailed information through the supply chain. And finally, we have got definition about smart packaging that can be considered as one that possesses the capability of both intelligent and active at the same time. So smart packaging provides a total packaging solution that on the one hand monitors changes in the product or the environment intelligent, plus the characteristic of the active packaging. So it means that it can hands up upon these changes. So for this reason, just to summarize more or less this definition, we can say that the usual characteristic of the packaging, so to protect, communicate, leverage on convenience and containment, is also divided between these different definitions. So, for example, we can have that active packaging is more about protection, while smart packaging is more about communication, and intelligent packaging is about all of them. So, protection, communication, containment, and convenience. So for this reason, we decided to carry on a systematic literature review, analyzing the paper that have been published in this field from 1991 until 2021. And we have got 966 articles. These articles have been then analyzed, considered the ABS list, and we find out that at the end, considering the main topic of the papers, only 130 were suitable for the analysis. So we analyzed not only the characteristics of this paper, considering the definition, as I said before, but also how the leading journals they published this paper, the name of the journal, the number of published articles, the number of publication over years, the trending articles, the geographical location of these papers, the methodological approach used in this paper. We try also to analyze the theoretical framework, tools and research methods, data collection, and the entity of analysis. So we ended up with these primary findings. So surely from 1991 to the 2021, we have got an increasing trend, and many papers considering in the last 5-6 years have been published in this field. So it means that sustainable packaging, active, interacting, intelligent are very hot topic nowadays. But we have to say that there are some countries that are more interested in in these topics instead of others. So, for example, we can see that in USA it is a very hot topic, while in UK and also in Italy is green is considered as interesting. But also we can see also Germany, Spain, and India as well. And the main issue that we consider while focusing on this paper is, of course, innovation, because it's something very innovative. Also, the design is another element that is very interesting. Sustainable packaging, of course, so sustainability, all the elements linked with sustainability, waste management, but also the importance of label is primary in this field. The way it can help the supply chain management, the function that it can add to the usual packaging, the consumer perception of the packaging, the logistic management, and finally also the brand management, because as we said before, there are also content that can be accessible through this kind of packaging. So we ended up with analyzing the potential barriers, the potential facilitators, and main outcomes that can be included in this paper, can be found in this paper. So potential barriers means that the use of sustainable packaging is still linked with a linear economy perspective. So the usual economic steps that we know, while the main outcomes and potential facilitator can lead to reach a circular economy perspective. So, for example, potential barriers to the use of sustainable packaging are, of course, economic aspects, buying routines. So, for example, we found out that for consumers it's quite difficult to change the way they interact with packaging. For them, it's just a pack, so they don't want more content, or they don't want to for example, use Q code or use the other facility to lower the degree of waste. And also, for example, resource constraint, this affect mainly the organization because they don't have enough, for example, knowledge to understand how to use sustainable packaging. Lack of support, this is an issue that, for example, we find out inside the supply chain, where we should have, for example, a network from the manufacturer and the supplier to reach the customer in giving information on how to use these new facilities. They don't cooperate together in order to allow the best way to use this innovation. And otherwise, some other facilitators are, so for example, social pressure. There are, for example, in many papers, especially published in the USA and in Sweden, that they say that consumers are trying to push firms and organizations to embrace these new facilities because they really want to have more opportunities to put into practice the approach of the circular economy. The added value is another potential facilitator because there are companies that they know that they can increase, for example, their reputation and their image if they are associated with this kind of new facilities. Collaboration coordination is another element that can be considered a facilitator, and the same, for example, is about avoid contamination. Think about the use of packaging during the COVID pandemic crisis. So we know that many companies they decided to over package their goods because people were very much in risk, and they prefer to have more than one layer on the top of their goods instead of getting the virus. And some of the outcomes that we found out in the papers are linked with the brand perception, that is improving, or behavioral changes. So as I said before, there are a niche of consumers that really want to change their habits, and they want to embrace a sustainable approach to their life and to their consumption. Also, the other elements are linked to other outcomes, are linked with emission reduction, efficiency, supply chain efficiency, or integrated packaging. And other elements that can be also interesting are linked with the green logistics, for example. So what we analyzed is also the papers considering these elements, so the stumbling blocks, the collaborative issues, and the buying process, considering these three cluster, and consider two dimension: the partner level, consumer level, and linear economy, circular economy. So as you can see that there are many papers that are focusing on stumbling blocks. So for this reason, the circle is bigger, while the number of papers decrease for collaborative issues, and there is a trending, a lot trending in papers that are approaching the consumer point of view. So, coming to a conclusion that is more a future research agenda, the article suggests and the study suggests to understand, to not underestimate the direct contribution that the 5G technologies can offer to sustainable packaging, and of course to expand brand experience leveraging on these new technologies involved in packaging, but also to explore the link between innovative packaging and branding and artificial intelligence. So think about the use that we can do with artificial sensors or drones or other new technologies embedded in packaging, and how they can help companies and consumers to collaborate together. Moreover, we also want to use packaging to sustainably promote economic growth. In fact, as I said before, there are geographic areas that are more interested in this field, while others are still considering it as uh, just a tool, not a strategic tool, but a tactical one. So there is the need to understand the key factor of success that are linked with the sustainable packaging in order to improve the characteristic of gross domestic product as well. And then at the end, there is also the need to create a virtuous circle in which the sustainable packaging is one of the elements that create this virtuous circle, and that can lead us to embrace the circular economy approach. So thanks a lot for your attention, and feel free to ask me any question or to get in contact with me by emails. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Palazzo. Very interesting talk, and all the time that you were talking about. And since my approach and what I teach is cognitive psychology, and I'm thinking about all those aspects a lot, especially a lot of implicit aspects. We talk about embodied cognition and things like that, and that becomes very relevant in many of the things that you were talking about when you say packaging. Why some people would want a certain kind of packaging versus the other.
But I understand that you work with children.
No, I do work. Some interest is there, but we are also looking at the young adult population mostly in the universities. Yes.
Because we found out that this is an issue mainly for old people, that they have got their own routines with packaging, so they don't want to get accustomed to the news that can be involved in this
Yes,
field.
yes. Aging has its own interesting way, um, a factor that comes in terms of a lot of these human factors, as we can call it, that influence. Yes. Would you prefer the questions now? Maybe we can take a quick one or two questions.
Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Priyesh sir, any questions out there?
The floor is open for discussion. Any questions from you all people?
Hello, good evening. My name is Sunena. I don't have any questions per se. It was a very detailed and a very nice presentation. I think I just wanted to appreciate and really mention that it was a very nice presentation and it was very informative. And I'm very glad to be a part of this presentation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Elena. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
May I ask a quick question for the
Yes, of
benefit
course.
of a lot of students who are listening? Now, what are the sort of people who work with you in the teams from, and from there? Is it a very interdisciplinary team? What are the sort of skills that are very relevant in probably going ahead with research in this field?
In the teams, we have got many of us that are involved in marketing, communication, and especially branding and corporate social responsibility. While what we don't have is a psychology person. So this can be, of course, a future idea for developing it more. I have to say that this is just a very brief preparation for a work that we submitted to Journal Cleaner Production, that is an interdisciplinary journal that is mainly linked with the engineering topics and issues. But we are also aiming to approach, for example, other journal like psychology and marketing. And of course, we have to leverage more on the psychological aspect, as you said before. So maybe this can be the starting point for a good team enlargement and enrichment.
There's a lot of interest in our universities across campuses on something like neuromarketing and that sort of approach. And they are interested in tools like eye tracking and using some of these neuroscience based tools. Yes.
Yes, true. Eye tracking would be one of the technology that we need to understand how consumer really interact with this kind of facilities, because you can track the way they look at the codes, look at the contents, but also the way they, for example, as I said before, elderly people, they have got issue even in opening the new packaging. So something that seems quite silly, quite simple, is for them a very difficult task. So they prefer not to buy even the product if they are aware about these new facilities. They can be a really, for them, can be a barriers. While I think that there are, of course, other people's, maybe younger consumers, they can be attracted by these facilities, and they will interact with the codes and with the artificial intelligence elements before than I do, because I'm older than
Yes, yes.
So thank you for
Yes.
your suggestion.
Okay, okay. Sir, do we have any question there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
To ask a question from my side, ma'am. Dr. Maria, so thank you for the wonderful session.
Thank you.
And this question is very similar to what Dr. Madhavi was referring. I was about to ask, so, neuromarketing going hand in hand with sustainable packaging, and how do you see the work that's happening right now in EEG and fMRI studies at your place? I would like to hear.
As I said before to the professor, this is a field that we are not yet approached. So we are still in the first phase, that is more marketing, communication, and CSR. So of course it is involved, and it must be involved, because I don't think that is actually, marketing is an interdisciplinary field of study. We cannot have marketing today without talk about psychology and sociology and other elements that involves, of course, neuromarketing as well. So for this reason, I said, if you have got feedback and other suggestions for enriching my research agenda, please get in contact with me also by emails, and I would be more than happy to involve several of you in the study as well.
That would be great, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Palazzo, would you be staying on
Yes, I will.
for the rest of the session. So maybe towards the end, we could have both the presenters interact. Would that work?
I will do my best, but I have got another meeting, so I don't know if I
Right.
can
So,
stay
so
until
then
the
I'll
end or
ask
not.
our second presenter, Dr. Jacobs, if he has any
Thank you.
questions for you while he was listening to you. Would you have something to ask Dr. Palazzo? Dr. Jacobs?
Hi. So, sure. So, I guess particularly on the sustainability side here, I was wondering if you could maybe talk more like what are some of the barriers you see for people maybe choosing more sustainable packaging over more traditional forms? Because it seems like sometimes, like some groups of people or some audiences are really for it, but I know that us, like in my context in the United States, there are also some people who maybe it's more difficult. So just wondering if you could talk more about some of the barriers to acceptance of sustainable packaging.
When we talk about, thank you for your question. When we talk about the barriers and we consider the consumer point of view, we have always to refer to the usual context of the fit. So there are, for example, some countries. Italy is not one of them, so maybe US it is, and Sweden as well, in which the consumers are more prepared to approach sustainable elements, sustainable features. So they not only are prepared to use the different function, but they also require the companies to put them into practice. So this is what we find in different papers, while in other countries like, for example, Spain, Italy, and in other developing countries, there is not this real feeling inside the consumers. So they just want to appear to be green, but they are not putting into practice this behavior, or they are not showing any kind of attitudes to sustainable packaging. So for this reason, for example, we talk about skepticism. So several of the consumers seems to be a little bit skeptical. Is it working really in this field that seems to be linked with the circular approach, or is just another greenwashing activities, the sustainable packaging? And other people, for example, are completely indifferent to the use of the sustainable packaging. So if they find it okay, if they're not, it's fine as well. So these are just some of the barriers, but we have got more in the paper. We hope that will be published soon.
Well, thank you. Definitely look
Thank
forward to
you.
reading it. And yeah, the role of
Yeah, we hope.
culture. Yes.
Okay. So thank you. I would once again thank you, Dr. Palazzo,
Thank
for
you.
your wonderful presentation. It's very thought-provoking and also very detailed. And we look forward to reading your systematic review when it's published. I'm sure
Thank you.
it will lay the ground for a lot of future research.
I will be more than happy to share with you as well.
Yes, yes, we would request for a PDF file for the of the
Okay,
paper because
why not?
considering these days every journal is so expensive and access
It
to
is.
scientific literature is becoming very difficult, especially in our part of the world.
It's
Yes,
true. It's true.
thank you again.
Thank you
And
for your feedback
yeah,
and for the amazing question. Thanks.
okay. Right. So I think we will move on to our second panelist, and I would like to introduce our second panelist. He's Dr. Tyler P. Jacobs, who is a social and environmental psychologist, and he primarily researches on how self-transcendence and social influence can increase pro-environmental behavior. He received his Master of Arts in Psychology from Miami University in 2019, and he received his honors Bachelor of Science in Psychology from University of Delaware in 2017. He has very recently defended his dissertation at Miami University, where he received awards for his research, teaching, and mentorship. And currently, he is a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at Swarthmore College, where he is also an environmental studies affiliate. His work has been published in top journals, including Journal of Environmental Psychology and Sustainability. Now, our panelist topic is self-transcendence or self-interest, how different types of positive emotion predict sustainable behavior. Dr. Jacobs, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thanks for the great first talk. I'm Dr. Maria, and I'm excited to share my work on how positive emotions relate to pro-environmental behavior. Emotion has been identified as a key way that we can motivate all sorts of human behavior, and particularly behavior related to the environment. Early work in this domain largely focused on forms of negative emotion like guilt about one's past environmental transgressions or fear about the future of climate change. And though these negative emotions can be effective for increasing environmentalism, they have some drawbacks, such as potentially worsening people's mental health. And these negative emotions only tend to be effective if we provide a way to relieve them. For these reasons, other researchers, including myself, wondered if positive emotions could be both a more enjoyable way to promote environmentalism, as well as one that could be just as, if not even more successful. Early studies were promising in this domain, finding that greater happiness was at least correlated with more sustainable behavior. However, these findings in other studies didn't replicate, where positive emotions did not lead to more pro-environmental behavior, which made me think about, why is there this inconsistency? Well, I hypothesized that this could be because not all positive emotions are the same, particularly with how they relate to people's sense of self-interest. Considering the self and the self concept is particularly relevant for environmentalism because many environmental issues result from tragedy of the commons dilemmas, where people might prioritize selfish benefits like corporate profits or personal convenience over collective long-term interests that benefit future generations and the natural world. Although this framework hadn't yet been applied to emotions, there's some relevant work looking at people's values or their guiding principles that affect their behavior across their life. In Schwartz's basic values framework, it's particularly interesting to look at self-transcendence values related to benevolence and universalism, so aspects like being helpful, being honest, valuing social justice, and equality. These values are all about helping other people and the natural world, and they tend to predict more pro-environmental behavior. Conversely, people might instead endorse self-enhancement values related to power and achievement with aspects like authority, wealth, ambition, caring about success. These values all prioritize the needs of the individual over the needs of other people. And because of this greater focus on selfish benefits, tends to also predict less pro-environmental behavior. I then thought that this same framework of self-transcendence for self-interest could also apply to emotions. Indeed, we can consider emotions like thought, sense of awe that you feel when viewing nature, like looking up at the mountains or the ocean, as well as the emotions of love and compassion, to be self-transcendent emotions that lead us to focus our attention more on the needs of other people and nature, which in turn produces more connectedness with other entities, as well as more helping behavior. Because this shift away from the self towards others is generally beneficial for environmentalism, I hypothesized that self-transcendent emotions would predict more pro-environmental behavior. On the other hand, emotions like pride, contentment, joy, and amusement, despite also being positive, could be considered to be more self-interested emotions. These emotions lead people to focus more on their self, which can, in some situations at least, encourage more selfish behavior and greater self-focus, which, if it leads to prioritizing these selfish benefits, should mean that self-interested emotions shouldn't predict more pro-environmental behavior and could predict less of some environmental outcomes. As a potential mechanism for these effects, we also wanted to examine mental representations of people's self-nature relationships. So with my advisor, Alan McConnell, we've developed these measures. The first of which is inclusion of nature and self, which is the degree to which people see nature as part of their identity. So the more the self and the nature circle here overlap, the more nature is a part of one's self-concept. We hypothesize that self-transcendent emotions, because they encourage connectedness, should lead to more of this nature inclusion. It's also important to consider whether people see nature as larger or smaller than the self, which we call nature self-size. Here again, we use these circles, but this time we're interested in which is larger. And since self-transcendent emotions lead people to focus on the needs of others, this could lead people to see nature as larger and more important than the self. So I'm going to go through two studies here that support these hypotheses. In the first, we recruited 408 undergraduate participants and had them complete the dispositional positive emotion scale. We averaged together the items for all love and compassion, with some examples here, to form an index of self-transcendent emotion, and averaged together the items for pride, contentment, joy, and amusement to form an index of self-interested emotion. They then completed our measures of nature inclusion and nature self-size, a measure of those self-transcendent and self-enhancing values, and the measure of self-reported past pro-environmental behavior. We then used multiple regression analyses to look at the unique relation of our two predictors, self-transcendent and self-interested emotion, with our pro-environmental outcomes. First, for self-nature representations, we found that self-transcendent emotions uniquely predicted greater nature inclusion and seeing nature as larger than the self, whereas the opposite was found for self-interested emotion. Interestingly, self-transcendent emotions uniquely predicted greater endorsement of self-transcendent values, whereas self-interested emotions instead predicted greater endorsement of self-enhancing values, supporting the idea that these emotion types are rooted in these parallel value systems. Finally, and most importantly, self-transcendent emotions uniquely predicted greater pro-environmental behavior, whereas self-interested emotions actually predicted less. So, study one generally supported the idea that self-transcendent emotions are related to more pro-environmental outcomes, but we wanted to see if these relations would persist over time, and we wanted to see if they would predict actual pro-environmental behavior as opposed to just what people say on a survey. So I'll go through the second study quickly. First, participants completed our emotion measure at the start of the semester. Then 2 to 3 weeks later, we brought 186 of those participants into the lab where they completed a recycling task, which I'd be happy to describe more afterwards if you have questions. We then used logistic regression analyses and found that self-transcendent emotion dispositions uniquely predicted more recycling, whereas self-interested emotion dispositions did not. In sum, across both studies, we found that emotions like awe, love, and compassion that are self transcendent predicted greater pro environmental outcomes, whereas self interested emotions such as joy, pride, contentment, and amusement did not. And then study one actually predicted less of these outcomes. I believe this explains that inconsistency I talked about at the beginning of the talk. Positive emotions might only relate to more pro environmental behavior if that positive emotion is self transcendent. In future work, and some of which I've already been working on, I'm exploring the effects of other self transcendent emotions such as moral elevation and gratitude to nature, as well as experimentally manipulating them with these emotions to test causal effects, because these first studies are just correlational, so we can't really say that self-transcendent emotions lead to more pro-environmental behavior. So I have some additional promising evidence that they do. All right, and I'd just like to quickly end by thanking my graduate school advisor and co-author on this work, Alan McConnell, the research assistants in our lab from when I was in graduate school at Miami University. I'd like to thank my current institution, Swarthmore College, and you, the audience. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. It was really interesting study and very lucid presentation. The floor is now open for questions. So do we have questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Suk, and so I'm just trying to understand. So, and also like sort of gain some input into what's if I'm thinking the right thing. So, I was thinking of behavior like hoarding, like there are a couple of memes around where everyone is like Asian mothers would always like collect all the empty bottles, empty packets, and they would keep it future. And something like that. And then uh, versus uh, something where a minimalist aesthetic or a, a s- I don't know if letting go is considered a transcendence behavior, but it has those implications. Whereas something like, and the minimalist aesthetic with the transcendence and not hoarding and all of those complicates the issues. So, in a real life situation, or if I present a hypothetical case, uh, where does your theory have implications? What implications would it hold for someone who is going through a lot of environmental guilt, seeing everything around, seeing the packaging and everything, and not wanting to throw it out, but also at the same time wanting to live a lifestyle without guilt and anxiety and not want like I hope I'm trying to explain myself. I hope it's clear enough.
Yes,
I
thank you,
just want
Kate.
to know the implications in that sort of a scenario.
Yes, thank you. And I think I do understand what you're saying, and you're absolutely correct with a lot of environmental issues, and particularly with climate change, we have seen a real increase in climate or environmental anxiety, where people really are so worried about climate change and often get really concerned about how they're harming the environment, which we want people to be concerned, but like you said, we don't want it to reach the point where it meets the point of a disorder, where it's interfering with people's ability to function. So, as for how self transcendence relates to this, I think in some ways self transcendence could be a good thing here, because by maybe reducing the focus on how you as an individual are affecting the environment and maybe focusing more on the system that could be beneficial, and the feelings of mindfulness that often come with self-transcendence can often be great for mental health, which could help as well. But I have wondered myself, like if you're someone who feels a lot of awe towards nature and really enjoys spending time in it, or gratitude's another self-transcendent emotion. If you're really grateful to nature, maybe that makes climate change seem even more devastating. So I think it's a really interesting point because, on one hand, on a basic level, I think self transcendence would be good for mental health and might be good to help people let go. But if it's leading people to care about nature, it could also ramp up some of that eco anxiety. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that should be researched more. Great question.
Any other questions, sir?
Good evening. My name is Jasmine, and I wanted to understand when you talked about different ST emotions. I wanted to understand the methodology behind understanding the relationship between did understanding the relationship between different emotions in correlation with the real world environmental activities that were seen. Did you understand it per emotion wise, like joy or awe, compassion separately, or was it seen together? So just that.
Great, thank you. So, how we measured it here was we kind of grouped these emotions together based on theory. So, we do have like each of these. So, we have all love, compassion, pride, contentment, joy, and amusement are all measured by the scale, and each have about 3 or 4 items each. Some past research had suggest that you can group them together in this sort of more self-transcendent or self-interested way. And we found that was particularly productive because it allowed us to, using this analysis called multiple regression, kind of test these two groups against each other, which did give us these fairly like convincing differences between the two. But I think it also could be interesting to examine these separately, and I've done that some. What seems to be particularly, if there to be like one emotion that was the strongest here, it's probably the emotion of awe, which is this feeling that we often get from nature itself. Again, from like looking up at mountains or out at the ocean or at a grand natural scene. So I think if I had to say like one individual emotion was the strongest to look at here, I'd say awe. But love and compassion also have this self-transcendent aspect of caring about other people. And in other work, I've examined gratitude by having people write gratitude letters to nature. And that seemed to be a particularly powerful experience for a lot of folks too. So in any case, we did, to answer your question, we did group them together based on these two categories. But I think looking at like individual discrete emotions here can also be a useful approach to take as well.
I think a parallel question to that is, are they additive?
Are they?
The different individual emotions, do they all have a role to play? Are they additive in some sense? Or is it just some like few, like it's sort of like overlapping Venn diagram, sort of like your INS?
Great, yes. So with these, just going to go back to our list of emotions here. So I think in some ways they are overlapping in that like people who are more likely to feel awe are probably more likely to feel love and compassion. But these are also often treated as discrete, and ideally we'd like people to feel like a lot of all three. And I think there might be certain situations where different ones could be the most relevant to a situation. Like maybe if you're thinking about, oh, that one natural space makes me feel so much awe, maybe that would lead you to be particularly want to take care of that space. Or maybe if the question's more about, I feel a lot of compassion for people who are suffering from climate change, maybe that feeling of compassion in that situation is what's going to be most important for driving your behavior. So I think they can be somewhat overlapping and additive, and but there could also be certain situations where certain ones could be most important.
We have another question.
Other questions from the audience online? Okay. Should be able to conclude this. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs.
All right,
I
thank you.
have a question.
Sure.
Yes, just to take the moderator's advantage and ask you the last question. Actually, one of my students just presented in this conference and she looked at climate anxiety. And when you brought it up, I got really interested. And an interesting correlation that we observed was we had these questions about climate action, being involving in climate action. And it was a really strong, significant negative correlation between climate anxiety and climate action, which seemed to suggest that people who actually do something about the cognition of things going bad, perhaps are more protected in that sense, or something like that. So something we would want to explore, and perhaps we'll be in touch with you later. But this was a finding we found. It's a small sample study, but this was from India.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and yeah, that definitely would love to be in touch about that. Like, because I know I've read some other work, but it was definitely in a different context where they found, I think, the opposite actually, where folks who were doing more pro-environmental behavior felt more climate anxiety. But I think that's a really interesting difference, and it's one I can maybe I don't know if there's a context or cultural element, but it's one where I can definitely see it going both ways. Where, like, with you're saying that maybe if you're someone who does enact a lot of climate action, it relieves your climate anxiety.
The levels of anxiety were low, unlike a lot of other countries. I mean, there was some other international study which looked at the cross-cultural as levels of climate anxiety. So there is more worry and less anxiety. So the levels typically were low. However, this correlation was there uh, in the population, which was interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and yeah, definitely love to chat more about that sometime. Like, it's really, I think it's something where how can we figure out both how to lessen this anxiety, or how can we figure out how to have this anxiety be a productive thing for environmental action rather than something that weighs people down.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for this interesting talk. And Priyesh sir, do you want to take over?
Sure. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for facilitating a wonderful session. I hope it was a fruitful session for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on behalf of our university and the Department of Psychology, Christ Delhi NCR, I would like to thank the speakers for the day, Dr. So in her absence, and Dr. Jacobs for their valuable inputs. And I would also like to thank Dr. Madhavi for moderating the session and having a wonderful discussion with all of us. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
May we log out?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with conclusion of all the academic sessions that we have had so far, So we'll be having the valedictory in a couple of minutes. Please stay tuned. Thank you.
Requesting all the participants to please be seated for a few minutes. Philosopher Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." Hoping that this international conference has kindled many thoughts, we regather here to acknowledge them and call for new beginnings. We are honored to have amongst us our campus administrator, Father Sunny Joseph, whose support guides a plethora of goal-oriented actions in the institution. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Father Sunny Joseph to enlighten us with his thoughts and kind words.
Good evening. It's actually first time I'm greeting good evening to the students, and that to the psychology students. If it was not psychology students, they would not have been, the seminar hall would have been empty, but kudos to you. And the theme that you have taken is absolutely vibrant, and that prompted you to be here, not only to save you, but even save your own children and their children, right? A big applause to you for that matter. My dear faculty members, especially the HRD of the school and the Christites and the universities of Salerno from Italy, and all the members who have participated online as well as offline. I'm really happy because the day has been very enlightening through different sessions on interdisciplinary trends and practices in the field of environment and sustainable development. And it's our honor to have organized it here in Delhi NCR, and you have taken that lead because this theme was in very close to you, as I have interacted with many students as well as faculty of psychology. The SGD, that is it, right? We call it the Sustainable Development Program. So it has been a very lively program, and to the University of Salerno, Italy, observed from morning onwards, there were many learned scientists who presented their experience, research, and shared their knowledge with great enthusiasm. I met a few down there in the garden, and they were actually mesmerized by the settings you have set here in this campus. And I even invited them to see our 32 sustainable facilities here where through not even a drop of water that has drained in the campus is escaped. And they were amazed. And they even, some of them even were happy to come and visit the STP, whereby the used water is recycled and again being used here. You are catalysts. You would take this idea that has been implemented to different campuses, different organizations. And I'm sure this program that you have taken up, the International Conference on Environment and Sustainable Development, will instill you to carry it in your organization later. I've heard also about some of the papers and research contributed greatly to our knowledge of environment and sustainability. Mrs. Srimati Nas, Dr. Hans Werner Esman, Dr. Suresri Chaume, Dr. Chitij, Dr. Ramveer Tanwa, who have achieved great heights in the field and equally promoted environmental welfare and sustainability globally, and they have graced us with their presence. They shared their humbling experience in this field. Dr. Hong Ching Ho discussed how awareness can change the environment. New understanding of how fishermen relate their behavior to changes and uncertainties in marine habitats and coastal communities, and the context for policy design and implementation to improve capacity and outcomes. In the field of fisheries and marine economy, they are going to be great contribution. The alarming impact of industry on sustainable development and how the 2030 agenda will help India achieve the sustainable development goals was also being discussed. The UN's 2030 agenda for sustainable development provides the international community with direction to achieve a balance of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. The technological and political possibilities for the sustainable development of groundwater in India were presented in addition to the antidote to the greenhouse that has become commonplace in many companies today. One cannot think of a circular economy without circular management system. We need to reuse and recycle as much waste as possible so that it goes back into the economy rather than ending up in landfills or littering the environment. Waste management is essentially where we close the loop. The role of the media for a clean and sustainable society was discussed, how it should act as a catalyst, and how the climate change challenges and opportunities are offered to us. When people are aware of how their actions negatively affect other people or the environment, personal standards break. We need to apply brakes in that area. Understanding the consequences instills sense of responsibility for one's action. I appreciate the sustainable packaging influences. I appreciate the School of Psychology and the Humanities, where you have taken this lead in this campus to conduct this international meeting. I thank the University of Salerno and its delegates, officers, and responsible members who have labored to send an impact on the circle of the Leonard. I thank the Department of Psychology with its HOD, Dr. Surekha, and her dedicated team with faculties and students who made nights into day to make this happen. Congratulate the Christchurch and the participants for receiving the concepts discussed today and urging you to carry on them beyond university campus and beyond landfills. Thank you.
Thank you, Father, for your words of encouragement. The International Conference on Environment and Sustainable Development, Interdisciplinary Trends and Practices was a kaleidoscope of perspectives, opinions, thoughts, and ideas. It took many forms when looked from different angles and also reflected stimulating questions and enriching answers. On that note, I would like to take the opportunity to invite Dr. Kritika Rastogi, Conference Coordinator, to present the proceedings of today's event.
A very good evening to all of you. Summing up an magnitude is itself a grim task, but however, I will try my best to make it as concise as possible. I'm very glad and elated to read the summary report of International Conference on Environment and Sustainable Development, Trends and Practices organized by Department of Psychology, Christ deemed to be University Delhi NCR in collaboration with University of Salerno, Italy. The inaugural of conference happened with the invocation dance, song and lighting of lamp, which is a symbolic of spreading knowledge and was graced by more than 600 delegates around the world in both online and virtual mode in the courteous presence of our two guests of honors, Srimati Naz Rizvi and Hans Werner Gussman, and our special guest and collaborator, Dr. Maria Plazo, University of Salerno, Italy, also graced the event. Post which we had keynote speaker Dr. Sushri, Senior Technical Specialist, International Center of Research on Women, discuss the integrative role of women toward a sustainable future. People and Planet narrative from the field and takeaways conversation session by three dynamic speakers, Kshitij, Mr. Suresh, and Mr. Apurva Bhandari. We inaugurated EcoMart, the Sustainable Bazaar, which is an effort to sensitize people to make efforts towards a sustainable living and future. We saw some of the best and thought-provoking conversations through 6 panel discussions, which had contributions of various eminent personalities from esteemed institutions around the world, like University of Malaysia, Salisbury University, USA, University of Vienna, Flame University, Wildlife Institute of India, Sharda University, Indian Agriculture Research Institute, University of Delhi, IIT Delhi, IMI Delhi, Tata Institute of Social Science, University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, Swarthmore College of USA, to name a few. We had a symposium presentation, and after that we had a talk by Ramveer Tanwar, the pond man of Delhi himself. After which we had a very interesting workshop on personal ecological norm activation. Around 530 local and global cities around the world registered for the conference, and we accepted around 180 research papers for both oral and poster presentations, which presented their paper theme-wise in 15 various tracks, chaired by highly esteemed academicians and research experts. I'm elated to inform that among these 120 research papers, plus oral presentations, few quality research papers will be published with our publication collaborator, that is Asian Journal of Water, Environment and Pollution, which is indexed in both Scopus and Web of Science. Apart from these statistics of willingness to contribute in the conference around the world has made this conference a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kritika. In addition to igniting minds and sparkling thoughts, all of us would agree that the much awaited part of any academic activity is the moment of receiving a certificate in appreciation of participation and presentation. To support these little joys of our audience, may I invite Dr. Ridhima Shukla to announce the Best Paper Award to our esteemed participants.
Many congratulations to all the presenters and congratulations especially to the winners. So the first Best Paper Award goes to Miss Rashika Tabassum from Jamia Millia Islamia University. She presented a paper on effect of mental health on organizational climate and among academic staff. The second best paper goes to Christ University students Sibin Sabu, Riches Janisha, Siva Jagannathan for the paper titled Technology Enabled Public Participation Framework for Co-Designing Equitable Social Housing. Many congratulations once again.
Congratulations to the participants. I now invite Dr. Garima Joshi, Conference Coordinator, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I am sure you must have been waiting for this moment. All right, so I feel honored and privileged to get the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this special occasion. I, on behalf of the organizing committee, convey deep regards and hearty thanks to our Honorable Dean and Director, Dr. Father V.G.P. Devasi, and Campus Administrator, Father Sunny Joseph. I'm also thankful to the guests of honor, our keynote speaker, and our invited speakers. And we would also like to thank Dr. Bhavna and Mr. Sabu for helping us organize the Eco Mart, which has proven to be a huge success. I'd also like to thank Dr. Chubby, Dr. Pramila, Dr. Nitika, and Ms. Meera for their support and cooperation throughout the conference. A special thanks to our head, Dr. Surekha Chakaldi, and our academic coordinator, Dr. Ridhima, and all our department colleagues for their constant support since the inception of the conference's idea. And I would also like to thank all the honorable delegates, our student delegates, who have blessed us with their presence. And I'm also very thankful to the conference, all the conference advisory committees that we have. I would also like to extend my immense gratitude to the CDL team, the auditorium and venue management team, the IT team, the security team, and our housekeeping staff for their constant support throughout the event. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling months prior, and we have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated student committee and student volunteers. So a big thank you to all the volunteers. I cannot thank you guys enough for your involvement, your constant involvement and support, and the willingness that you've expressed to be a part of an event like this through your, not just the presentations you've made, but also through the volunteer support that you've offered to us. And if time is money, you have spent millions for